All right, well, we're back again, and, well, this last week, though it has been a clown show, it's been a little bit less honky, so, you know, take that as a racial epithet. I'm sure you will, so enjoy. Anyway, I'm back with me. We got Craig. We'll probably have Steve here in a little while. He's got his normal duties. So, we could start on the news of the week. I mean, I guess we could... I kind of want to save the Cuomo stuff for when he gets here because he's really got...
I'm sure we're going to go through it all over again, but, like... So I got a couple of questions which we can at least have marinating in the background.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, I know the first couple that came up actually, like, definitely had receipts on them. Like, they were things that definitely happened, and people knew about them. There were, you know, like, emails or phone records or what have you. There was, like, a paper trail to go down. It wasn't some Me Too bullshit.
Yeah,
like, it was legitimately, there was harassment there.
Oh, yeah.
At least there was a paper trail, but they said it was harassment, regardless of whether or not it was. There was at least physical evidence, not a he said, she said going on.
Right.
So, if we're up to some count above 2, the question now comes, what fraction of the total accusations have a paper trail behind them, if any?
Right.
You know, beyond the first couple of them there.
Well, from my understanding, the newest one, I don't know any of the evidence or anything. I believe there are emails, but the newest one is as of the time of reporting, still a member of the administration. So, like, current employees. Now,
that's great.
So probably not a current employee any longer, because you know, if we know how things work.
Got into high gear, didn't it?
Oh yeah. You can just about guarantee that.
Delete fucking everything. That'll solve the problem. There's no backups.
None at all. Oh, and before we really dive into anything, the weekly GameStop update. It is $200.27. It's not going anywhere.
A little above 10.
A little. You could double it and add a 0, yeah.
That's a hair above the mark that they were going for, a hair above the waterline.
Just a skosh, an eensy beans, if you like.
That must really suck for a couple people on Wall Street right about now.
Oh, there's a certain hedge fund.
Imagine being in that hedge fund where not a single one of your predictions came right after the end of last year, and you're just sitting there watching the amount of money that you owe go up the entire time.
Now, let's imagine you're Janet Yellen, and you're actually connected to that particular institution.
Yeah, there you go.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Surely I'm talking hypotheticals.
Wouldn't that be hilarious, huh?
Yeah, no worries. I'm sure old Janet will recuse herself from any investigations out of piety and a sense of duty to the station. You know.
God, she failed upward like a fucking rocket.
Almost as well as Officer Harris.
I mean,
Speaking
I'm just hoping that
Officer
Janet Yellen,
Harris.
I'm hoping that Janet Yellen's gonna go off like Challenger. You know, not quite to orbit, and then gone. Everybody will go, oh, that's a tragedy, and then the rest of the world will move on. You know, someone will talk about O-rings in court, and then nobody else will care very much about that.
I also wouldn't mind if the thing that they got to head the Department of Education, you know, found another career. Honestly, I think that would probably be good.
Yeah, like sanitation. Well, they probably fucked that up too.
Yeah, I don't know if I would trust such an individual to, handle, anything really. If I'm being entirely honest.
Stuff you literally don't want to get back. You'd think they'd fuck that up.
And in an interesting update, I'm sure you've heard of Drag Time Story Hour, right?
Yep, I know what you're talking about, yes.
Oh, do you? So have you heard of Cream City?
Oh, you mean when it turned out they were a pedo op?
Well, yeah, there's that. Well, how shall we say, Cream City was the name of the organization run by the judge, the child's court, family court judge that ran the Drag Time Story Hour. So yeah, that kind of happened. So, it's been an interesting week. I do have a really kind of off-topic, but a good piece of news. Mm-hmm. Fritz the cat is actually going to be coming out on good physical media this summer, and it's probably going to get canceled. So get yourself a copy, because it's legitimately good storytelling.
I legitimately don't know what that is. Maybe I'll look into it.
It's a cartoon from an era. It's an adult cartoon from an era when there weren't adult cartoons. So it's real quality stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah, one other thing too. Let me scroll down through here.
Oh, so what's the status on your 3D printer? You got that thing up and running, or?
It should be running. I haven't done I haven't flashed it yet, so okay. I'd like to get that done this week. It's been, honestly, it's just been really busy.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it happens. And of course, another interesting piece of news this week, since, might as well open up with the news. That's the happening stuff. Joe Biden said that, he said that Vladimir Putin is a soulless killer, to which Putin replied, okay, takes one to know one. In not so many words, but yeah.
Oh, you see, that's the thing, is he's not wrong. But because he's such a sack of shit, he's probably going to be able to be called out for it, and because he's a dumbass, he's not going to have anything to say when Putin says, okay, go sniff another kid.
Yeah, speaking of kids to be sniffed, I've got some great news for, actually any of the people that would think this is great news probably don't listen. But if you are listening, old Joe, he's made sure to get some cargo containers, put them down on the border. They've got loads of kids rolling in. They're putting them in the containers. They're putting them on planes and shipping them up north. There's going to be sniffs for everyone. You're going to be able to sniff your favorite child soon.
Wasn't it like a child courier? Wasn't it like a couple $1 billion or whatever for 1,200 hotel rooms to be rented out? Effectively.
Yeah, a couple billion. I want to say 8.
That's just that's a small number. Let's do that.
Oh yeah, no, it's just a pittance.
You got $20 in your pocket, right? You can give that Daddy Gov.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got money to spare. Everybody's got $1,400 to spare, right? Oh, sorry, 2,000 to spare. Is it 2,000 or 1,400? I forget.
Well, it's probably going to be less than both of those. At least I'll say this: the checks have gone out.
They have.
For the vast majority of people, we'll say that.
Just in time for taxes.
I believe they were $1,400. The downside, of course, being that this time around there was no protection. That if you had a lien or outstanding loan or any of that kind of shit going on, that could be garnished. Yeah. So that $1,400 for a lot of people is unfortunately not going to cover jack squat or be able to be held in savings of any kind.
No, and for any number of people, I mean, I don't unfortunately have a link to the story immediately because it just kind of passed by, but there was some lady on food stamps that went to the really fancy grocers and got like a $500 lobster. What are you doing, people? Why are you going to do this?
Hey, man. Congratulations, you got a nice meal. I hope it was worth the whole fucking third of your check.
Right? I mean, you could take that money. What is it? There's somebody that's tracking the value of Bitcoin, and they've been tying it to the date of the first $1,200 check. And I think it's something like if you'd put in your $1,200, you'd have something like 10,000 right now.
Yeah. That was fucking funny. It shot up all of last year along with the onset of inflation from M0.
Well, Bitcoin is basically e-gold anymore.
Well, that's what people keep trying to bill it as, and it's not strictly speaking true. It's probably never going to be true.
Well, no. But I mean, I use the analogy because it is a commodity in its way.
It's an asset that is non-fiat.
Indeed, it's based on something. What value you put on that something.
It's based on the algorithmic yada yada yada. But the fun thing is that Yellen comes in. She's been pitching to the U.S. Treasury her idea for a U.S. digital dollar, and of course, Bitcoin is terrible because the government doesn't control it, but also because Janet Yellen says energy blah blah blah. It's like, okay, well, F2 is now functional, and that proof of stake solves all those inefficiency problems. This is one of those free market things that was bound to happen. It finds the most efficient result. Turns out that proof of work, while it is fantastic in a small localized setting, maybe, the golden goose here that's been given out the eggs is the blockchain, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin's only been a proof of concept ever, so it's really not going to be anything that's going to be missed for the proof of work to go away.
Well, I mean, honestly, you can look at Bitcoin kind of like MP3. There's better stuff out there. There was better stuff out there not long after it came out.
You can look at Ethereum is like FLAC, and then you've got your better codex than that even that you're going to see refinements that are coming down the road. Cosmos with proof of stake, the staking model is great with it.
Oh sure, and I mean if we look at Bitcoin, it's a genuinely inefficient process-wise. I mean it uses a lot of electricity and power.
The hilarious thing is it's vastly more efficient than the current banking system.
Oh yeah, which is hilarious. Yeah, it absolutely.
That is the funniest part of it is Janet Yellen made this announcement, and in the same week, the fucking Fed lost power and the entire banking system went down. You could not send money between banks for hours.
As a matter of fact, yeah, that is.
But then again, it takes you a fucking week to send money between banks in the first place. So. Her entire argument's just dead in the water unless they figured out how to send stuff between banks around the planet in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, what was the date on that?
Which I can guarantee you they have not figured out how to do yet.
Was that this week or was that last week?
That was last week. It wasn't this week.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that there, though. Let me see here, because there's been a little... Oh, shit, no, that was 3 weeks ago. Man, time flies.
You know what? Well, I recently had some time dilation medicine in my body, so...
Well, yeah, you can be excused. You had to get your bionic ears
I'm going to go ahead and claim chemical excuse here.
Yeah, no worries. And I'll put a link to a story on that. It's from, almost a month now since that happened. Just everything in the world kind of seems like it's coming in at just a record pace.
Oh, it's Steve's here.
I was going to say coming in at a record pace.
And Steve's here, and we were saving some Andrew Cuomo meat for you.
Oh yeah, the juicy bits of Andy Cuomo.
Although if you've been trying to talk at all recently, we had not heard a single peep out of you. So
yeah, you could be muted or something. Okay. Well.
Just sitting here thinking 3, 2, 1, and then he hasn't left yet to fix his mic problem. He also could be getting a beverage.
That's possible. That's entirely possible. Well, no worries on that. What we can do,
just
link up. I heard a beep. Hey, what's up, man? I'm glad you could make it.
Well, I was listening to boring.
No, obviously not us. Excellent. Good thought. So we saved some of the juicy stuff for you. We were wanting to drop into the Cuomo stuff because there's plenty. And, well, I know you're just a big fan and you'd have a lot to say about the issue. So you've heard the weekly updates for Herr Cuomo.
So we haven't stuck a fork in it yet. We're waiting.
Well, I think the opening statement there is pretty accurate, right? If there's nobody as juicy as Andrew Cuomo, and
he's a juicy boy.
He's juicy. He's got the fucking slick ass jeans that are bedazzled and say juicy on the ass. That's
believe
how
it.
juicy Andrew Cuomo is. But
Well-
no, I mean, like, seriously, the dude seems to be in an asshole competition, and then he decided that nobody was as good at being an asshole as he was, so he decided to run against himself and try to outdo his assholey nature every week. It's pretty fucking...
Well, you know, you got to remember, in sports, the only person you're competing against is your personal record.
That seems to be the case. I mean, the one thing that I will say, and this is actually, like, conservatives, Republicans, whatever, anybody who is dealing with cancel culture and the culture wars right now should watch Andrew Cuomo and watch Donald Trump and take a lesson from that playbook, because here's the deal.
Yep.
It requires more effort for them to remove you than for you to remove yourself. And that's what Cuomo's banking on. So in order for Cuomo to be removed, he's got to get impeached for the whole entire thing. Now you turn around and you look at most of the Republicans, you look at most of the conservatives, they're basically canceling themselves before everybody else has the opportunity to, just because of public pressure.
Well, let's
And
look at
clearly
where that started, though. Like, if you go back a little further, Al Franken, that dipshit, he went ahead and left office. And that was off of an accusation of maybe having some possible appearance of impropriety.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, well, there was a picture, but then again, there's a picture of Cuomo, and that girl does not look comfortable, if we're being honest.
Well, again, I think the takeaway should be that it is harder for the opposing side to remove you from whatever they want to remove you from than it is for you to remove yourself. And that's what cancel culture and Me Tooing has always been about. It's raising a hubbub so that you self-censor or remove yourself. Now, there might be legitimate cases as to why we want these individuals removed. I've got a list for why Andrew Cuomo should not be our governor. But
I know
that being
I would
said,
imagine.
I
Start with your taxes and end with the last dollar you paid. Somewhere along those lines.
It's a long list. It's a long list of reasons why I will be happy to have him gone. But I do think that the thing that we should observe is, despite the fact that he's been Me Too'd, 8 times now or something like that, despite the fact that he murdered 15,000 people, he hasn't been removed from office.
Wait,
because
15,000?
it's a lot harder to get him.
15,000? That sounds like it's more than died on 9/11. Or is my math wrong?
Oh, man.
Just
Wait. According to Aaron Rupert, it would be about 5 times the amount of people that died on 9/11.
That's about right, yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw that latest entry to Urban Dictionary. I think that's hilarious.
Oh, yeah, I did just hear about that. That's break it down for us. Break it down for us, because I don't actually remember it right offhand.
Oh, so, you know, if a story, if someone is doing some sort of press conference or what have you, and you see someone tweeting out a whole bunch of out of context one-liners that have nothing to do with the actual point of the video that's posted underneath them inside the tweet, that's called getting Rupert.
Oh, wow. We're sorry. We couldn't find Rupert in the Urban Dictionary. Well, I was going to link it to you good folks, but I guess somebody got upset about that.
Search. Okay. Rupert.
Well,
I'm searching Urban Dictionary. I don't believe they've already gotten rid of that.
that was quick.
Wow, they already have.
That was
Shit.
quick. Okay, well, I'll put up a cached version for everyone to check out.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, I think I have the photo around here somewhere. Hold on a moment. I'll go get it.
See, I don't know who this dude is. So
he's a Vox journalist.
Yeah.
I use that term very loosely, kind of like his anus.
Well, that's funny. The word of the day for the day of this being taken up was vaxhole, that's nice. One who has been vaccinated for the COVID-19 virus and brags about it. 2 weeks after the second shot, and that vaxhole is posting selfies from a Cancun bar.
I gotta be honest. Like, if I could get vaccinated and then go hang out at a Cancun bar, like, no, I wouldn't post a picture of myself, because who the fuck does that?
Yeah, who do you think you are, Ted Cruz?
As an individual who has no intention of getting vaccinated, but can at any time, because I have special permissions being who and what I am, I will still go to a Cancun bar and tell everybody to go fuck themselves.
He says not from a Cancun bar.
Actually, we're literally planning a vacation right now to Las Vegas, and it's going to be like the Tahiti Lounge or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a Cancun bar, but I got to pick up Vegas or Nevada. I haven't picked up Nevada as a state yet.
Oh, right, yeah, you're working on that list, so yeah, that is important.
I was going to give you shit, but go for it. That list
only ever landed in that state.
No Mile High Club for you, huh?
No, and frankly, I hate the airport. The Vegas airport is terrible. I'm not a huge fan of Vegas in general. It's a little bit too gambly for me. And as much as like, and it's kind of weird too because like as much as I'm all for like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? The one exception that I have that I take moral offense to is gambling, and those people are fucking zombies, dude, right?
You noticed, didn't you?
It can be.
I legitimately. So I previously, before I was a nuclear engineer, I was a tech working on ATMs and whatnot. And we had a contract at the local casino because I'm right down from the racetrack, and so there's a casino up there. And I had a Dremel with the lock was broken, right? The lock mechanisms were broken. So we were literally, replacing it. It was all jammed up. We couldn't get. They had these weird like half lock washers that just basically once you tighten them into place, they can't come off because hey.
Right.
That's kind of a sensible thing if you're handling. Like I actually physically held hundreds of thousands of dollars in my hand at one time when I have to sit there and clean out the friggin' win a chance. And so I'm going into this ATM, and I got the cover down, right? The monitor's off, and I have a Dremel cutting through the bolt at the top, so there's sparks flying as I'm cutting through this thing, and somebody walks up and goes, is the machine out of order? They like were trying to use the fucking thing. And I was like, what are you doing? Oh, the machine's broken. What do you think I'm doing here with a friggin' Dremel tool cutting the lock off? Like,
thanks for skipping the line, man.
Yeah, man. Jeez. These people were wanting to use that. Maybe drop some money in there.
It is an
How
automated
inconvenient.
process. So, like, if all of a sudden there's a network failure for the ATMs, and, like, all of them go down at the same time,
oh man,
it's a goddamn crisis because those people will shuffle their weary souls from machine to machine to take out $100 here, and you'll see like if you're there for because the process takes longer than 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Sometimes, every once in a while, you get into like technical code crap that's really annoying, and you'll see these people who will come to that machine 3 or 4 times in the time that you're sitting there and working on it and take another $100 out and another $100 out. And it is, if you want to get high, I have no moral compunctions against people who want to get high. I would much rather use the tax money. I would much rather tax whatever substance you have of choice and take the funds from that and build a national rehab program than to sit there and start throwing people in jail because they want to get high. Totally on board with that as the process. But when it comes to gambling and casinos, I'd have no issue if we banned that. If we said, no. I'd be okay with that.
That is a literally perfect segue to a topic I wasn't even sure we were going to get to. So let's talk about Kamala and smoking up in the DA's office while she was listening to Dre and Tupac. So, if I'm not mistaken, Dre and Tupac, they came out with their eponymous albums. They're starting, right about the time she had gotten finished wiping off her chin and lighting up a blunt in the DA's office. And if I'm also not mistaken, at the very same time, she was keeping black men in jail, much like her, family is used to doing, for crimes that they didn't commit, and then keeping them over their stay so that they could do slave labor for the state.
Oh, she's pretty known for the slave labor thing. Like, that's like her go-to.
But the interesting part about that is we found out that recently she got oh, wait, no, it wasn't her. It was 5 other people that smoked pot before that got fired from the White House.
Right.
Oh yeah, even though they said they were going to be lax about it, etc.
Yeah. See. This is one of the things that really pissed me off. There's a couple things that I think Trump could have done to really turn the tide. And sitting there and saying that if you elect me, I'm going to legalize marijuana on a federal level would have won him the election. Because all of those pot smoking hippies that always vote Democrat and they never bring in the drugs, all of them would have sat there and gone for the one guy who actually had it as a mainstream platform.
Oh, yeah.
And he would have lost nobody on the conservative side.
I mean, if you thought 80 million was a lot, he'd have gotten even more than that. Oh, what am I referring to there? Well, I can't really say, so we'll just leave it at that.
But nobody should be surprised. This happens all the time with the Democratic Party. They sit there and they come out, and they tout their, like, cool dude vibes, right? And they sit there and they talk about how they...
Beta O'Dork was such a cool cat.
Right.
You know, he was part of Two Cows, except, like, he fucking wasn't.
Are you talking about the wee Bobby Francis O'Rourke? Oh, Bobby Francis. Yes, Bobby Francis O'Rourke.
Robert.
Well, I like
Robert
Bobby.
Francis.
It's got a more Gaelic sound to it than Robert, you know, considering that he's, you know, Irish. Bobby Francis. Bobby Francis O'Rourke.
I still like calling him Beta O'Dork because he's the version that comes before a full release.
Oh, it's a wee bit, yes.
I just don't understand why it is that people sit there and keep getting suckered in to a group of folks that stand up and say, hey, look at us, look at how cool we were for smoking dope. And then all of a sudden they turn around and they throw everybody in jail and you're like, oh, we thought this time you were going to sit there and come around. They never do. Like, nothing ever changes.
Reset that clock. Well, that is to say, only on days ending in Y. Yeah, so yeah, that's where we are. It has been a clowny week. Not the clowniest week, but it does. I give it 3 honks.
Did you guys go over Biden falling up the stairs?
No, we haven't covered that yet.
No.
And then again, I'm not sure anyone's finished covering his ass.
Well, see, that's the weird part is, you know, tripping on the stairs is a perfectly normal thing to do.
Oh, sure.
Like, I'm sure that the majority of Americans, if you just turn around and said, yeah, I tripped on the stairs, like, what's the big deal? Most Americans be like, yeah, I trip on the stairs a couple times a day, right? Like, that, it just happens. You move up too quick, you're not paying attention. There were cameras around, because there's always cameras around when the president goes up. But then they turned around and they decided to say, oh, the wind blew him over. And that is the dumbest fucking thing to come up with. Like...
No, that's true. I actually did hear about that. I'll make sure and put a link in here.
The slightest breeze, because none of the fucking trees were moving.
Well, ignoring whether or not it is true.
Nobody's hair was moving, nothing.
That is a statement of weakness. Right, if the wind can blow you over...
Oh, maybe if it wasn't a fucking hurricane, but it was sitting out there on an open airway with no... Like, it was perfect weather outside. Like, we're talking about less than a mile an hour shit going on here.
Had he just turned around and said, I tripped, it would have been, like, over and done with.
Yeah,
but
that was
instead,
a fucking golfing joke.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. He is the best golfer.
Yeah, I'll link that up. I've got a New York Post article here for that one. But yeah, the White House legitimately tried to throw that on the wind. I mean,
I just
that's like Benghazi being the fault of a YouTube video. Give me a fucking break.
I mean, even if it was windy, that's not the thing that you turn around and choose to do.
Yeah, do you really want to portray the president of America in such a fashion that he can be blown over? You know, I mean, blown over by a stiff breeze? Is that really the picture of strength we want to present to the world?
I mean, if somebody is concerned about your frailty,
look,
right?
it takes away from him not being able to remember his own fucking name.
I don't think it gains.
That's the bar we have now.
Well, you know, I want to give thanks to that guy over there that runs that place.
Yeah, that
That guy being the head of the Pentagon.
Small details.
Little things.
Yeah.
I mean,
check your inside coat pocket there, Biden.
Again, I'm gonna sit there and come out and defend those kinds of statements because, I mean, you guys want to hear a terrible story? So my wife came up to visit me when I was back in college, right? And this is the first time I'm meeting the girl, and I'm going around and I'm introducing her to people, and I forgot her fucking name while I was introducing her to people. Like,
that's rough.
It happens. It happens. It's not like...
Yeah, it happens. Just, not when you're the fucking president and you've had this on your schedule for months.
No, I mean, I think it still does, right? Like, I regularly forget who it is that I'm talking to when I'm at work all the time. And it's not like, it's not senility. It's that I have more important things than...
Alright, let me just phrase it like this. It was probably written on the fucking paper in front of him.
That's possible.
Well, we have...
That's possible, but...
We have seen that thing, happen more than once, where he reads the part that's supposed to not be read on the teleprompter that totally isn't there.
See, that's I think, the thing that really is the problem, is that you get these little gaffes and goofs, and if he just turned up and owned it and said, yep, I made a mistake, it happens.
Yeah,
right?
the dude could go full-on Al Gore with this stuff, but...
Right.
Yeah,
like,
he could. He could, but he isn't.
But every single time, they come up with a cover story that legitimately makes it worse.
Oh,
I don't know how you can do this on a routine basis.
It's called being a Democrat. It's the same shit where they're doing the same exact thing as before with, like, the filibuster and whatnot, and not seeing how any of this is going to kick them right in the ass.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be...
It's coming, and it's going to be glorious, and they're not going to be able to do anything but bitch and moan and call the other side racist and sexist again.
Continue to do so. Anyway, I mean, they never really stop.
What they don't understand is that they get these wins because they whip up their base, and they do that, and that only happens when a Republican's in office. You can't do it at any other time. So they won't be able to. They'll go up and they'll be trying to run on their platform, and nobody really likes their platform, and they're not going to have a base to whip up. And all of these rule changes that they've decided to make, the Republicans will engage on and take advantage of, and they will beat them at their own game. It happens every single cycle. And then they sit there and they freak out because the Republicans then get to ramrod stuff in on a precedent that they set, and they can't really argue anything other than, oh, it's not fair, it's only fair when we do it. And you're like, yeah, okay, that doesn't really work, buddy.
Yeah, and worse yet, I mean, there's actually at least some popular support behind most of these Republican measures, where a lot of these far-lefty ideas are generally not supported by any of the mainstream, just the most, the squeakiest wheels, if you will.
What I'd like to see is I'd like to see a poll today that says if the election were held today, who would win? Trump versus Biden, right? Because the media hasn't been able to say anything about Trump. He's not allowed to tweet right now. So the negative aspects aren't there, and they're not able to harp on these negative aspects, and then you have Biden just basically screwing the pooch 3 to 4 times a week.
You know what? I've actually got an interesting little update on that that's just come out today. It's tangentially related. You may or may not have heard, but apparently in the next few months, Trump is going to be making his return to social media with his own social media.
I was going to bring that up.
What?
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up. I think I was going to be something I was going to mention that was just funny to me.
Yeah, it's just wild. We'll have to see how that turns out, but there's going to be
pretty amazing.
Trump space. I don't know, Trumper.
Trumper was what I was saying people should use, and without the E.
I mean,
I was saying they should name it Trumper without the E at the end, so PR at the end, and that would piss off everyone. Because why the fuck would you do that? And that would be why it would piss me off. But I know that would also piss off all the Tumblr idiots because there's no E at the end of that one. And then, it's just, people would call it Trumper, have people Trump things, so sending out Trump things, re-Trump things. People can like each other's Trumps.
Well, actually, I would think it would be better to give everything a bigly.
He'd be smearing his name, bigly each other's Trumps.
Yeah.
He'd be smearing his name like feces across the entire platform, and it'd be exactly what he loves to do in business.
Well,
and it might actually succeed if he does it like that and doesn't take himself too seriously. I bet you he could make it work.
So I think it's going to end up. What's gonna end up being successful here, and this is the other problem. They've decided to lock out one entire group of people. They've said you can't use our services, you can't use our social media, so they're going to build their own. And the consequence of Trump coming out with his own media platform, or excuse me, I had to sneeze. The consequence of him building up his own media platform is essentially where everybody's like, oh my God, we're going to get left and right camps. That's not true, because the right doesn't censor. So what's going to end up happening is all the right-wing figures will go on to right-wing Trumpdom or whatever, and then the left-wing folks will come on just because they have to follow and antagonize.
I was going to say, the best part's going to be when they show up because they need to cover, during, not his presidency, mind you, they need to cover Trump for the rest of his life.
Well,
because he can't ever be allowed to be repeated.
It's not even Trump, right? The left goes after the right. They just are constantly on the attack. They aren't like live and let live type people. They're antagonistic. And the consequence of Trump creating his own platform, or actually any other social media getting up off the ground that attacks the liberal hegemony, is essentially that you're going to create the new hegemony, and it's going to be controlled by the right, and that's going to be because the right isn't going to be kicking the left-wingers off their own platform.
Yeah, and let's be a little bit more specific on that too. When we say liberal, we don't actually mean liberal. We just mean leftists and far leftists, because liberals are on the right now.
Liberal is
right wing. Liberal and conservative are both right wing.
Right now.
Well, not now. But, in the grand scheme of the timeline of humanity, yeah. But now, everything right of Mao is far right now. So.
See, that's the difficult part is, do you call them liberals? Do you call them progressives? Do you call them Democrats?
I call a leftist a leftist and a liberal a liberal. Progressives are regressives because they're Marxist assholes using doublespeech.
Yeah, marketing newspeak and, oppression, simply.
Look, if you're out there preaching a message of peace, you're really preaching a message of war, and you are really if you say that everybody should be treated fairly, you're saying that we need to discriminate against specific people because you haven't specified which people you've said to treat fairly. Because you can treat people equally, but some people have to be treated more equally than others. Otherwise, you're a bad pig. Like, it's serious. Fuck progressives on all that bullshit alone. Like, they read shit like Communist Manifesto and loved it.
Well, basically, any progressive post-50s is not worth having.
I guess for me, it's a little bit. It's kind of a difficult thing because when I look over at the left, I'm trying to sit there and figure out which one's the Pied Piper leading the rats, right? Is it the progressives that have control over the party? Is it the Democrats that have control over their party? Or is it the liberals who have control? And I think the liberals have mostly shifted over to conservative or right-wing sides just because,
Well, even the center is the right anymore. So,
right.
It is what it is now.
But I'm really curious as to who's pulling the strings, and it's kind of I agree that it's tough to call them liberals, and it's tough to call them progressives, but those are the labels they tend to like to go and use them on their own.
Well, you give them the label that they want. That's fine. I'm a firm believer in being able to self-actualize and label yourself what you're going to be called. The problem comes about when they start trying to do that with everyone else. And then they decide to use their own fucking definitions because why the hell would you want to be able to use the English language?
Well, we can look at Urban Dictionary. We just
had
a new
beyond
word.
That shit, they have an entirely different lexicographical meaning to the entire language, where it is designed specifically to be confusing, to piss off the people that they are now working against. You can therefore state things that are perfectly rationalized truisms and mean completely different things.
I think that it's more along the lines of the Mott and Bailey argument is really what they're utilizing there. I agree that they're sitting there and altering the dictionary definitions, but I think it really comes down to a Mott and Bailey argument. They'll sit there and they'll use the term like systemic racism, and then you'll sit there and be like, all right, give me an example of systemic racism, and the best that they can provide you is shit that happened in the 1940s.
Okay, so there's a couple parts there we can dig into right away, but the first thing I'd like to say on that is it's beyond that. Just ask one of them what equality means.
Yeah.
No context.
Or better still, ask them what the difference between equality and equity is.
No, you ask that one after where they can't answer your question. Now, the thing for the systemic racism part, that's actually important because it used to be in the literature, and you go back and you look at the way that critical race theory develops. If you go back to the 80s, they talked a lot about systemic racism. And back in the 70s and 80s, they talked about systemic racism. It was all systemic. Specifically, they talked about how systems arise. They had complicated descriptions about it, but they had coherent and cogent descriptions about it.
Yeah,
and then somewhere along the way, towards the late 80s, they started dropping off systemic and just calling it racism, or they said structural racism, and they dropped off structural. But they ended up just using racism as a shorthand. And then the people that they taught in the fucking 90s, which are the ones teaching kids today, which is scary, just thought that they meant racism. So this is where you get that thing where if someone says, well, racism, I can't be racist, racism means power plus privilege. It's like, okay. You mean systemic racism or structural racism or structural privilege, because, again, privilege in that context was similarly truncated. Like, the etymology is important there because it explains exactly how their reasoning got twisted, and this is how that doublespeak comes in. That newspeak bullshit that they start bringing out. A lot of it is because they took complicated academic. I won't give it the benefit of the word rigor. They took complicated academic precepts.
There's nothing in the humanities that is. And
it's complicated because they looked at their navel and then they looked at their neighbor's navel and said our navels have different colored lint in them. But they put it through the meat grinder, and out came the simplified bullshit that they fed to the kids that were in front of them, and then they didn't bother to go back and read any of the text that any of this shit was built on.
The issue that you have when you start talking about humanities is not necessarily that is not that it's complicated because it's actually complicated. It's complicated because it's jargonistic.
Well, right? here's how it gets complicated. They write ethnographies instead of papers.
God, yes.
And so in an ethnography, not only is it acceptable to use block quotes, it's fully fucking expected for you to block quote damn near the entirety of other ethnographies. So when they have these large-ass screeds, and they call that an academic work, and it looks like someone's shitty Tumblr blog post, and then they get a PhD on that kind of stuff. Like, at the other end of it is going to be some kid sitting there reading this going, I don't understand what the fuck any of this means. I guess I just need to write my own and get my own degree. And that's supposed to sound as ridiculous as it is. Like, obviously there's some other kinds of work that go into that. They're probably going to have to take gen eds, or they're going to have to learn how 2 + 2 = 4, which is now racist. No, 2 + 2 = pi. Why the fuck would they go to a rational or whole number?
Well, I don't have a good answer for that, honestly.
There are certain things that have gotten twisted around with the humanities, and that's because there's two parts to that. One, they present concepts. They present very simple concepts in a complicated way, so it makes them sound smarter when they're talking to other people. And then the other hand is that they have so much jargon that all you have to do is learn a couple of the buzzwords and phrases, and it gets you kind of access as if you're talking on a large stage. It's like being the smart kid in high school and like the idiot that you used to sit there and, I mean, I'm sure Craig and I were probably both this kid, but the idiot asshole that just sits there and like uses big words all the time for unnecessarily superfluous verbiage, we'll call it. And
yeah, but you see, I actually just use that to be specific about what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I know.
Which is different than
just
being like,
Craig,
it's different than pulling out the $15 cocktail word and saying,
I got it. But when you're talking about...
Yeah, we're synergizing here.
Most folks who are sitting there in high school, like you use a specific word and you use that $15 word because the $15 word accurately describes what you want to talk about rather than 7 4-letter words, right?
Yeah, I mean, see, that's different, though, because I didn't just use, like, the $15 words all the time, because why the hell would you do that? You gotta really price yourself up there, pal. So what you gotta do is you gotta wait for, like, dead silence and say, like, hey, guys, did you know that black lung is really called pneumologic microscopic silicovolcanoconiosis? Like, what the hell? Isn't that weird?
But what you have is you do have...
This, by the way, would be an example of what he's talking about.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. It's...
And then whoever says coniasis at the end instead of coniosis, you're a fucking asshole.
You know what really irritates me is they sit there and they use, like, they try to sound smart in sci-fi or medical TV shows. You're like, why don't you just say heart attack?
Because myocardial infarct is specific and important, and nobody knows what a heart attack is.
Right, exactly. so they'll throw out all these words. What was it? There was a Rick and Morty episode, when they were shrinking down, right? Do you remember Oh, so there's a Rick and Morty. There's a Rick and Morty episode where they do the classic. Everybody shrinks down in a human submarine to go inside a doctor to sit there and save him from some stupid thing, right? Rather than using any one of the 100 drugs that are designed for the purpose of busting a clot, they're going to go in there with laser beams and shoot the clot because in a shrunken submarine.
Fine, Rupert.
So in any case, they have the main character doctor sitting there and trying to prove how smart she is, and she went on. It had to be like a 15-second spiel of various medical jargon. I'm like, all you're sitting there doing is saying that you're going to get attacked by white blood cells. Like, seriously, what are you talking about, lady?
I can imagine the experience is similar to watching the first Fast and the Furious movie if you're into cars.
That it could be, but that's what these people do in the critical race field is they use a lot of this jargon, or they'll invent their own, and then they'll try to defend it. And I remember there was this one paper that was making the argument that that clearly the number of women in management positions is not in any way due to differences between male and female brains, which is pretty much what the rest of the psychological literature said. And it did so by making up its own terms and its own characteristics, which they tested women on and found that they were better. This is not something that's adopted by anything else, and it's just these bizarre terms that have no basis. And that's kind of what we see with critical race theory stuff. And it's twisting and torturing words to sound smarter than they really are, and then you get a whole bunch of really dumb people who kind of follow along because it's just a long game of telephone. It's a long game of easy access telephone. I think it started out as a way for elite kids from elite universities to virtue signal to one another, and it ended up as this way for a whole bunch of idiots who don't actually know what it is to know something as a means of sitting there and trying to confuse everybody else around them with how little they actually know while sounding smart and trying to make money off of it. And it's ridiculous at this point.
Well, you could say it'd be one thing if these people actually knew what the fuck they were talking about, but it's basically all just garbage, gobbledygook, and jargon thrown together.
Yeah, it'd be really nice if they knew what they were talking about.
Well, it actually probably wouldn't, but, let's just...
No, I mean, see, the thing is that I think that if... there's two things that I run into, and I know we've talked about your buddy there that believes the Earth is flat, right? And my belief is flat earthers. Flat earthers are largely a social group. Now, I've heard that from not just from you, but from other people, that there's people who legitimately believe this. But I gotta question how many of the folks who are quote unquote woke are actually woke, or whether they're just internet tough guys pretending to be smart.
Well, I'm gonna tend towards more of the tough guy, or I guess in this case you could say the smart guy, but
smart.
Super smart.
Smart.
Yeah, the smartest of the smart. Unfortunately, that's really just kind of a picture of the times. Oh yeah, there was something else we need to go over too that's come up this week involving Herr Cuomo. I don't know if you guys have heard. I should have linked it earlier today. Yeah, I did. On the vaccine czar. Cuomo's vaccine czar, he had some things to say to some of the peoples of New York State. Maybe they need some vaccine. Maybe you don't support Andrew Cuomo. Maybe you'll find a horse's head in your bed. Who knows?
I find it very difficult to tease out what actually happened because there's no transcripts in the associated article. But
I had a lot of trouble finding a good, non-biased one because all the good news is in New York City, so I'm only going to find it out of the Post or maybe somewhere otherwise.
And you start reading it, and it kind of looks like in vaccine-related discussions, he talked about supporting Andrew Cuomo. And some people took that to possibly be an implication that they won't receive vaccines unless they support Cuomo. And I'm not...
Yeah, there's not hard transcripts.
Direct quotes.
Yeah, exactly that. But then again, there were no direct quotes of... there were direct quotes purported to be from Trump in the call to the Georgia legislators that was used as evidence in his impeachment trial.
What should my pseudonym on Urban Dictionary be?
What's that?
I'm trying to figure out what my pseudonym on Urban Dictionary should be.
There's this word. It describes a bundle of sticks. What's
yes.
that word? A bundle of sticks.
Or a pack of cigarettes.
I don't know if they'd be allowed
you should go by the name of cigarette.
Seriously, I would. Huh?
Cigarette always works.
Cigarette always works, yeah.
Only in England.
There you go, English cigarette.
Quite frankly, though, they use that more in the plural sense. If you're going outside to have a smoke. It's like, oh gosh, I don't seem to have any cigarettes. I'm gonna go down to the corner mart and buy myself
a bundle of sticks.
A pack of,
A bundle of sticks. A bundle of sticks to heat your house.
They say a pack of blanks.
Yeah, they do. And
who says that? Is that British?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's just
they use the shortened. They use the shortened plural. They don't use the full word.
Got it.
Yeah, and
got it.
As if they
we
roam
would
around.
Probably catch hell if I was to actually let any of us say any of that because every platform is weird and censorious these days. That being said, I'm hearing good things about Odyssey.
You could always phrase it as
use that one.
as Blanky McBlankface, and
handle's already in use by someone else. Full of shit.
All the good ones are always taken.
My name is a good name, but I'm kind of surprised that anybody else would have it. It might be that I'm already part of the website.
I'm gonna go with call your username should be password.
Let's see.
Or you could always go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're wanting something really secure, that's 6 characters.
Please check my email. My God, this is becoming more complicated than it ever needed to be.
Well, isn't it always? I mean,
why
we just
are you trying to log into
critical race theory to this. So.
That's the question.
Well, I mean, I might be putting in a definition right now. You never know.
Oh, fair.
I'm really surprised how quickly they're memory holding things now. That's the funny part, right? Now, like that was always the thing that turned folks like myself away from progressive causes. Is they basically make a claim on day one, and then a month or 2 months go by, and then they have to backtrack on that claim because it no longer supports the position that they want. And anybody who's got a memory that lasts longer than a friggin' news cycle would be like, hey, didn't you say this?
Yeah, it used to be they would at least wait the whole news cycle out. Anymore, you get an announcement in the morning, and you get a correction in the evening that is not announced. For instance, the Washington Post
thing.
Oh,
they made that disappear.
And people are still talking about it, but nobody on the left is even addressing it.
I think the so I was actually I've always tried to leave Twitter. I only came on for Gamergate.
Okay.
But you start digging into this whole entire thing, and I think I decided to quit after the Capitol Hill riot So I have no idea what's going on Twitter, aside from, like, whatever comes across, like, any of the other news feeds that I use or whatever I get from YouTube. Like, I don't even listen to whole Tim Pool videos now. I feel bad. But, like, I don't need to listen to a guy rant for 20 minutes. I just need to get a quick summary of the headlines. And it is amazing how quick this stuff is changing.
What should I say? The time cycles have gotten incredibly short as compared to what they were at one time.
Okay, so does this mean I actually defined the word or not? Oh, I guess it means I didn't actually do the fucking definition, because why the hell would I actually complete that? I'm going to have to start that all over again. That's so terrible.
No worries.
What a bunch of sticks.
Indeed.
Pretty much.
A bundle of sticks.
A bundle of sticks.
So,
oh my God.
the long and short of what I was talking about earlier with the vaccines are, there aren't any hard records of what happened, so all we know is the word of the people that have been talking to this vaccine czar. But the long and short of it is basically they're saying that it's been kind of implied to them that maybe if they don't support the governor with 100%, maybe they won't get 100% of the vaccines they need. That's the allegation anyway. We'll see how that plays out over the coming week, and I'll try and have an update if there is one for you next. But at this point, really, it's all just kind of par for the course. I mean, would anybody be surprised at any level of corruption in the Cuomo administration?
I mean, again, it's all implied, and one of the problems that you have is Democrats turn on each other the second there's blood in the water, and there's blood in the water around Cuomo.
And you know, that's actually, there's something to that. I was listening to something earlier today, and it was a really good point. Whenever the media makes you, the media can unmake you. But when you've built yourself, you're a lot harder to cancel.
In the case of
definition will be
Cuomo,
reviewed soon.
Godspeed, sir.
In the case of Cuomo, it's possible that is happening, but given how our politics works in this state, it's also equally likely that there's a whole bunch of people who are looking for negative news on Cuomo because he's no longer useful to the Democratic Party, and as such, anybody who's got a blurb is going to say something. It could just be that this dude is an aide and sits there and talks about how he needs their support, right? And he's using, these are politicians, right? These are politicians. They're coming in there and they're saying, hey, I need, oh my God.
Shit better be reviewed too, sweet.
What is this?
That's me posting what should already be on that website, but somehow isn't.
Giving us the updates, as it were.
This is, got it.
Oh, yeah.
I will hold off on, and this is the thing, I don't trust anybody who's Me Too and anybody else, because I think that for the most part, you get into these 30-plus allegations, and it's a pile-on, right? They're seeking that. And the same thing's true for all of the negative news coming out of Cuomo, right? He did 15,000 people. He hid that. He owns that scandal. That is a legitimate thing that has data backing it. He owns that. He is no longer the savior of New York.
To mention something specifically on that point, one thing I was genuinely concerned about is that was going to get buried in all the Me Too bullshit. But I'm actually hearing people bringing that up, too. It's like, oh, yeah, he's done this, but we need to remember that 15,000 people died. Oh, and the other thing that's recently come out, 15,000 people in nursing homes. We've recently learned that exactly that same thing was done in special needs homes.
Yeah.
And the worst part of that is they haven't undone it yet. It's still happening. His orders to put COVID patients back in these hospitals, well, I shouldn't say hospitals, in these treatment centers and care centers has not been rescinded. So not only do these people take in these sick people and they were never provided with the PPE, training, or extra resources they would need to deal with this. So they've been working their same shift with special needs people and it's absolutely horrifying. I'll put a link to that for everybody.
I mean, when it comes to that
awful.
scandal, what's strange is they broke the scandal, and then that's when all the Me Too stuff came in. So I kind of am thinking that they broke the scandal and they needed to get rid of Cuomo because he's basically dragging down the Democratic narrative of Trump's fault for everything associated with COVID, right? I think to put it here, let me actually go take a look at the numbers because they used to be about 30,000 people had died in New York, and that was our death total or somewhere around there. But what is it? I think it's COVID deaths, New York.
A lot.
It is
some 15,000.
So 50, a little bit less than 50,000. So about a third of the entire deaths in our state are due to directly related to Cuomo's order. A third.
And it should be pointed out that it's basically preventable deaths.
Right.
Not like, we let 15 people into the country, therefore we have all these deaths and it's Trump's fault. Like, no, directly he knew what the correct action was and what the incorrect action was, and took action to make sure the incorrect action was.
And there were alternatives, and they didn't do it. And
there was a fucking ship in the harbor right there that he could have used, that he did not use because fuck Trump.
So,
the man's own hubris.
People died.
I kind of think that the Me Too stuff came about because he wasn't backing down. He wasn't like closing out for this thing, and it would be better for the Democrats to go out on a sex scandal than it is to go out after having murdered 15,000 of your, 1/3 of your population in COVID being murdered directly at the hand of Democrat policies. Which, by the way, it wasn't just New York. As much as we like to go after
this very
Cuomo
same thing happened with Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan.
Yeah, and it also happened in Pennsylvania, and I think in Massachusetts as well.
Yeah.
So it was
in
pretty
Pennsylvania, that Levine asshole, Richard Levine. That guy needs to just fucking that is unconscionable. The shit he pulled. He took his own mother out of the nursing homes, and then instituted the policy. Specifically, he took his mom out of the nursing homes because of that policy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like that is like you knew, you fucking knew.
Well, and the question that I had when it first came out was, is this intentional to make COVID look worse than it really is?
The idea was that they were upset that Trump was talking about the bed numbers. They wanted to look better, and so they decided to turf all the patients out of the fucking hospitals to places that they knew would not be able to house them, would not be able to meet their needs, and could spread infection. But they also knew that it would get the hospital bed numbers down, and that's what Trump was zeroing in on. So they went ahead and they took that bait and they ran with it, and they did one of the most unconscionable things they could do. They sacrificed human lives for it. Fuck them.
It wasn't just the bed numbers though. Like every single time Trump was starting to give comparisons on any data metric, they would release a new policy that was to make that data metric look better, and a lot of times it was at the expense of people. The nursing homes was one of the worst cases, but, you start turning around and start talking about things like, Trump's up there saying, hey, we shouldn't lock down, this isn't wise, and that's actually kind of what the general approach was, and so instead they all implemented these half lockdowns, and our infection rate surged.
Yes, the thing is, the half-assed measures are legitimately worse
than doing nothing at all.
They're worse, in my opinion, than doing nothing at all, and if you're not going to do the full measure, which, let's be honest here, has a cost to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then a huge cost to it.
A huge cost, and the idea is that the lives saved are going to outweigh the cost of the lockdown. And part of that cost in the lockdown is in human lives. You cannot make excuses for that.
Yep.
You are arguing that you need to sacrifice some human lives to save many more.
And it's not, that's a lot of where when we do disagree on the COVID response and what we should do, that's really what the disagreement is on, is whether the economic impact is worse than the lives saved, right?
Yeah, and like I said, part of that impact, and I don't make any, there's no excuses here going on, part of that impact is going to be in human lives.
Yes, it is.
You're going to have people who are not capable of getting help, for some reason.
So you're looking at a massive economic hit, potential long-term social and sociological negative outcomes because of the economic hit, and then on top of that, you're still going to have new deaths that wouldn't have happened if you didn't do the lockdown as well, because response times and things like that.
And that is also suicide, etc. Yeah.
The only time that works is if you do a hardcore lockdown, and when we say a hardcore lockdown, that means
we mean
quarantine. Yeah. You don't get to go out unless you're an emergency first responder. It's not, everybody is an essential.
But we're also talking like, in my extreme scenario there, I said following the CDC's own fucking guidelines, which the CDC ignored, by the way, which is just par for the fucking course right now.
Yep.
By their own guidelines, you go by twice the longest known incubation time. That was 27 days. So we'd have to wait for fucking 54 days for a hard lockdown to have a measured, known success outcome.
And this is
a long time.
This is not where we turn around and we say that your grocery store worker is an essential worker and therefore they get to go sit there and run the supermarket that you get to go to. It means, it means that literally you're going to get a food delivery by a military truck and you're expected to stay home. That is the only way this works. It doesn't work any other way.
Yeah, as draconian as it is, welding people into their houses is kind of the right thing to do. It's the wrong thing to do, but it is a problem solver.
Well,
even if you went with just 2 weeks, it was still... It's possible, but what a pain in the ass,
It's not the welding people in the houses is not what needs to be done. But the point is that you either keep society fully open or you shut it down hard. And if you are going to argue that you're going to do a measure, that measure has to be extreme or nothing at all. Because you need to balance those costs.
If you're gonna not put in restrictions or anything, what have you, you need to not bullshit people. So tell them what's going on. And this is where I have a major disagreement with someone like Fauci. That guy fucking lied and he knew it. And he admitted as much in public, too. So this is not even like speculation.
Took him a while, but yes, he did finally come clean on that.
The same way everyone said he was going to lie, he lied. And then after the fact, he continued to lie.
What exactly did he lie about?
Well, he slow-blowed the impact of PPE requirements and the spread of the disease.
Let me break this one down for you directly. I mean, his first statements were, no, we don't need masks. You don't need masks at all.
Hold on.
This thing's going to be gone quickly.
His first statements, in my opinion, were his honest opinion. I
absolutely
believe that.
They were not.
They really weren't. He even admitted as much as himself.
No, he didn't.
He fucking lied.
Yeah,
he didn't say that.
He did.
He really didn't. If you go through the exact quote, that's not what he said. A lot of people are turning around and saying, hey, yeah, he lied. But what his actual quote was, we needed to sit there and save the PPE for essential health workers. And what a lot of people are turning around and doing is they're taking that quote and saying, well, that means that we all should have been wearing masks. And that's not accurate.
No, irrelevant. That's not the point here. The point is...
It is, though.
He said you don't need to wear a mask and don't wear masks because he didn't want anybody to go out and buy them. He didn't want people to go out and buy PPE that they may
I've linked to a Business Insider article.
Hold on.
It doesn't matter if you needed it. It may or may not need it.
Again, there is a rank order. As first off, we have talked about this. Just wearing a mask is not appropriate. You need specific masks. You need to follow specific protocols in order for a chance. And you and I disagree firmly because there is no data that supports it. Right? In order for a chance that it might work, you have to follow the right PPE, following all the correct protocols, and no one does that. Which all requires formal training, all documented by OSHA. That's how you get masks to work. Him coming out and saying you don't need to wear a mask is legitimately better than having everybody put on a cloth mask. We can argue that maybe they should have done
exactly
something,
cloth
but
mask,
we physically didn't have the PPE because...
We fucking did.
No, we didn't. China literally blocked it.
No, they were
shipping.
No, they didn't block it. They bought it all and shipped it home.
Mainland China. Yes. We did have PPE present in country.
We did not have enough PPE for healthcare workers who actually need it, rather than the general populace who may be assuming they did everything 100% correct.
I gotta disagree with you on this because I gotta tell you, the moment we found out that they were shipping all the shit back and then they cut off the exports, we immediately switched over to reuse. And with reuse, you extend supply. We had supply in the country.
But we really didn't, though. We really didn't have enough supply for appropriate infection protocols.
That's,
you know that.
That's not a good way of saying
That's 100%
we didn't have adequate supply for currently established protocols. It's not to say that it couldn't have been worked with.
We didn't have supply for appropriate OSHA, CDC, and standard bio protocols. We did not have
as soon as we implemented reuse, we had adequate supplies.
We still didn't have adequate supplies. We still didn't have adequate supplies for the entire population. We still don't have adequate supplies of N95s and the appropriate PPE. That's why every shitbag is walking around with a cloth mask, which legitimately makes infections worse. So when Fauci came out and said it doesn't matter. Spread or not. Okay. The actual infection that you get is
if we're being specific here, we gotta stay with specific, right?
It makes pandemic conditions worse. We are all in agreement that anything outside of ideal PPE with ideal use cases makes infections worse. So
that's a stretch, and you know it. If we're talking about cloth masks, yes,
if you are not wearing the right PPE, and that is a very specific subset of masks, which we didn't have. If you're not wearing the right PPE, you're making it worse.
The only specific one that absolutely will make things worse is wearing a cloth mask.
I mean, that's legitimately what they have. We do not have the N95. We don't have the ASTM level 2s. And
No. I will challenge you on that one all fucking day. We have ASTM level 2 and level 3 everywhere.
Not enough.
Tons of it everywhere.
Not enough for 360 million Americans.
I just got 100 of them for fucking $35.
Yeah, they're actually going back down in price now, dude. We got
plenty of them.
To wear one every day.
I got enough to wear every day for the next at least year.
And all of this, again, relies entirely on everybody following appropriate protocol, which no one does. If you do not follow appropriate protocol, it makes the infection worse, or makes the pandemic worse. If you do not use the proper PPE, it makes the pandemic worse. Fauci's statements are saying, let's let the limited PPE that we have go to the people who it will most benefit, and if you want to wear a fucking Band-Aid,
yeah, you know what he didn't do?
That's a dad idea.
You know what he didn't do? He didn't say that.
Yeah,
well,
no, he said, we don't need that. You don't need that. Not make your mind up. It was literally, you don't need it.
Lie. That's a factual
Are you shitting me? He fucking lied.
Dude, he was taking the same line as fucking Pelosi, like go and let a Chinaman cough in your mouth, or you're a bigot. No, he totally was.
No,
two different levels of theory there.
We're talking,
one of them is saying you don't need to protect yourself. The other one's saying put yourself in harm's way.
And again, if you don't use it properly and you don't have the right PPE, which there was absolutely limitations.
Now I gotta ask you another question here.
By the time you're done, he is correct that it is better to not use it.
We can move on from masks because we're at an impasse here. All right, it doesn't matter. Just taking a step back here, neither one of us is going to be proved right here, and we're both going to think we're right at the end of it. So, moving on from that part, something Fauci didn't say is, stay home. He said the same kind of shit. Go on about your lives, live normally.
Which, again...
He did not say go down to Chinatown like a fucking prick.
Yeah, he wasn't full on Nancy Pelosi.
Even then, we just talked about that protocol too. In order for it to have an effect, it has to be hardcore. And looking
if you limit your exposure outside, then you're limiting your exposure outside.
If you are not in a hardcore lockdown, it's worse than having no lockdown at all. And I think that when Fauci first came to the public and said, this is what we should do and this is what we should not do, it was not a lie. And I think what ended up happening was basically every single mainstream press outlet was
the only way
not doing lockdown works.
The only way not doing a lockdown works is if you have a well-informed public and you tell them to protect themselves. Imagine
the only way a lockdown works is a hardcore lockdown.
Imagine if you we're talking about government enforced mandate here versus your own ability to judge for yourself.
But again,
the point here is, imagine you had an epidemic of fucking 90-year-olds at the steering wheel, and you went out for a bike ride. Obviously, you're gonna wear a fucking helmet, right?
Sure.
Okay. So there's a difference between the government saying, if you don't wear a helmet, we're going to arrest you, and you need to stay in your home until you put a fucking helmet on, and going outside, looking around, seeing a street packed with people who can't stay in the lane, and then going, oh, I need to wear a helmet.
So again, I'm going to ask you to sit there and take a look at the states that decided to go against the initial order of lockdown compared with those that decided to lock down. And across the board, those that decided to do any form of lockdown whatsoever did worse in all metrics than the states that did nothing at all.
There was a break.
Florida is the best state in the union outside of, I think, maybe like Utah or Montana or one of those Midwest.
The thing is, there was a flip in these metrics around September, October time last year because people started. So not having a lockdown is different than going outside and fucking off because reasons, political reasons, or what have you. It's very different from going outside and intentionally socializing to say "fuck you" to the man.
Or burn down the business of your local colored community
during that entire period of time.
There's spring break, and then there's spring break, and then there was July 4th. That's really kind of the big ones.
But I mean, at the end of the day,
the point here being that the metrics by which you're talking here, we'll just be honest, the red states were doing better than the blue states.
Across the board, and they
more or less
still are.
Correlates with the lockdowns. Well, that's the thing, is they weren't midwinter.
They weren't
by infection rates. By infection rates alone, we're talking like
infection rates on a specific day at a specific time.
Over a time period.
No, those infection rates. No, I'm pretty sure that on a per popula basis.
Well, this is the reason why I was railing against both sides of the aisle here for making this shit political. It's because it legitimately, over the last whole year, fucks people in every state.
I mean, we can just look at organizations saying it's okay to go out and protest, but, if you're... Well, depending on what you're protesting, actually. If you're protesting lockdowns, it's not. But aside from that...
if you went out there to celebrate the fact that Biden won, shared champagne bottles with your Antifa friends, and then got COVID later and went, oh, God, it's no joke. How the hell did this happen? I was wearing a mask. Shit like that. Yeah, that's one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is when you walk around outside saying, you know what, not only fuck this lady who's telling me I can't go outside, but I'm going to go ahead and have beers with these guys over here because First Amendment and shit, right? All right, that's most people who are going outside and expressing themselves at these events, and we're talking about Whitmer and her ilk here. Most of the people that would go out to these events would stay socially distant, would use some clear precautions, like if someone looks sick, don't go near them. Basic shit. There was still a slight bump in the infections, and you'd expect that just by the numbers. That doesn't mean that there was a massive explosion. And again, with these kind of things, a single unit step event, a single impulse, a one-time deal, is not going to cause a major explosion in infections.
Sure, but at the same
pretty much
time...
Not. If you have to have serial events, and that's basically the kind of shit that Antifa did.
At the same time, and I'm pretty sure, actually, it looks like North Dakota and South Dakota had the highest cases per million people, but that's probably because they have no people. So.
Well, this is what I'm talking about here, is it also largely correlates with population density. So if you look at Florida, where were all the infections? Miami, Orlando, Tallahassee, Jacksonville.
But again, in terms of lockdowns and how we saw them implemented, we can argue about this theoretical, fictitious, ideal scenario, be it masks or lockdowns.
Sure.
But that didn't manifest. And it was never going to manifest. And Fauci's
we talked about this last year.
Given the fact that there was no perfect implementation of the ideal scenario, Fauci's statement was absolutely correct. Fauci's statement was
See,
100% correct, and he changed it at a later date.
I still don't think his statement was correct. And again, specifically because he followed that shit up in such a way that he basically was suggesting that you don't need to take precautions. And I don't care if your precaution is putting on a fucking bandana, at least, or just staying home.
I absolutely care if your precaution is putting on a bandana.
That's very much different. It's very much different than go about your lives exactly as normal.
Except again, looking at the data, right, based on what he had at the time, which I still agree with. I think that when he first came out with his statement on lockdowns and his statement on masks, those were his professional opinion.
Right.
What happened was
this is coming from the same people though that got caught with their pants down, that knew China was lying, and then still went with the same fucking data and what directed their policies to say, regardless of the fact that they knew this. They knew it was airborne at that point.
Well,
they knew it.
I don't think it's ever been proven to be airborne.
Fine, you know what?
Quote unquote airborne, aerosolized, shall we say?
Within a certain distance for a certain amount of hang time, it exists as an aerosol, and they fucking knew that part.
What happened with Fauci and his mistake was backing down. He should have held his position and held his ground, and now everybody's accusing him of lying because he basically caved to public pressure. For
Public
idiots
pressure being
don't know what the fuck they're talking.
It's not just that he lied, it's that he lied, persisted the lie, he evolved it to fit the situation to benefit him politically, and then continued that lie until later he admitted he lied, and then lied about that shit too.
I will go with he didn't lie. He did capitalize on the political situation, and he reversed his opinion when it was politically convenient to do so, rather than operating as an actual expert and sticking to his guns, which is what he should have done.
He very, very conveniently remembers his position and the extent of his ability to opine on subject matters when it benefits him to keep his mouth shut. After that, though, he's happy to go out to other organizations outside of, say, a Senate hearing and tell them all kinds of personal opinions that will contradict or contravene in his professional opinions. Or extend well beyond the horizon of his purview.
Again, I still think that the problem that you have right now is, and this is not you, this is everybody has.
I get the royal you here.
Right, this is the problem that we collectively have with Fauci, that any individual who is a professional, who operates as an expert in their capacity, we should all be angry with Fauci. I'm not defending Fauci. I want to make that very, very clear. As much as I am defending his initial statements, because I believe that in a professional capacity, that is the appropriate choices, and I think that he made them in an appropriate, and he conveyed it as best as he can, given the fact that, again, like we've mentioned before on this show, nobody wants to talk about actual risk and like the relative ways and cost-benefit analysis and do the actual legwork in front of the American people. So I think that
no one wants to do, say, pulls out the actuarial tables and say we expect these many people to die. Well, that's the funny thing is they kind of did, and then they revised the numbers.
They did.
I said kind of for a specific reason here. They kind of did. They didn't pull out the actuarial table. They put up a big ass
fucking model.
They put up a shitty curve and said 7 million people are going to die, and then they went, oh, we meant 2, and well, no, we ended up with. They said if we do really, really, really well, only 200,000 people are going to die.
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, I believe that. It's just that we haven't been doing really, really, really well because half the states in the union are fucking retarded in the head. And at the best possible moment, when everything's starting to calm down, the other half of the states go, you know what? It's time to get retarded here. And then you have the fucking election about halfway through that retardation. And along comes Thanksgiving and then Christmas. It's like, well, why is 3 weeks after this shit all these cases coming around? It's like, well, what the hell do you think, man?
The thing that I think...
And then they tried to blame that on January 6th as if a handful of people at the Capitol would spread disease throughout the whole fucking country like that.
Or, ignoring the fact that the BLM riots had associated increased infection rates wherever they occurred.
Significant increases. As in, they were statistically quantifiable.
Yes. But of course, you saw half a dozen experts. But what we were going on is, and I think where we can all agree, is that Fauci. I don't want to say that he lied. I think that he told
I'm sorry if I'm yelling here, by the way. It's just between the one ear buzzing whenever I talk and the fact that this shit boils my blood.
Oh no, this absolutely should, and like to our listeners, all
and
five.
It's not you that's like pissed me off here. Like this whole thing
right.
is fucked.
This is the kind of thing where Craig and I will yell at each other, even though we kind of agree on almost everything, because it pisses us off. Because basically, so engineers,
they don't listen to the goddamn engineers. That's why it's fucking bullshit.
Aside from the fact that if you're not an engineer, you just shouldn't be given a license to speak publicly. I think that would actually solve a lot of problems.
Just shut up, doctor. The engineer's here to talk.
Oh, you're only allowed to run as a politician if you can do a basic cost-benefit analysis and speak intelligently.
Can you take the difference between two numbers and tell if it's greater than or less than 0?
That would be at least a basic litmus test.
I would be very okay with requiring, the before you can register as a candidate, you have to go past your
or how about this?
EIT,
How about this? They give you an algebra equation, the solution to which is the number of people that you have to get signatures for. And then if you don't get that exact number of signatures when you walk in, if you don't have the ability to erase a few off of that form to make sure you got the right value.
I think it'd just be straight like you have to go take the FE. If you can't pass the FE, you're not allowed to run for Congress.
All right, for context, the FE is the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. It's the first step, the first named step in the process of getting your professional engineer's certification. And when they say fundamental, they fucking mean it. Like, you can walk in as an uncooked turducken and you could still pass this thing if you got like 2 brain cells to rub together.
What's amazing is that some people fail it.
Yes. There are people who fail the FE exam who still get a degree, mind you. Scary.
Oh,
it should be that if you fail the FE exam, like on your second or third attempt, like your degree should become null and void. It should just be taken back. But seriously, if you have enough brains to get through some basic algebra stuff, and you can just kind of work on the jargon a little bit, like you can solve all the problems in the thing pretty easily. It's designed to be easy.
When I studied, I think the only thing that I covered really well was the math section, which is only about 3 out of 26 chapters.
Yeah.
And in those 3 chapters, that provides you everything that you need to solve every other equation in the entire thing. And the rest of it's just a waste of your time.
Well, quite frankly, the PE exam is supposed to be somewhat similar in that capacity, which is going to be fun. But I'm going to take that at some point relatively soon.
But going back to the original thing, the reason that folks like Craig and I have our blood boil when individuals act like Fauci has is it's a question of ethics and basically licensure. We are culpable personally and even financially if we fuck up.
Yeah,
our ass is on the line.
If the bridge collapses, it's your problem.
It is your problem. Like
it's your signature on the fucker.
That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to go to jail, but you may be financially responsible.
You might never be able to do engineering ever again.
Yeah,
you might have a compelled midlife crisis.
So there is like when you hear Craig and I argue about the scientists and us complain about the scientists, and especially with things like climate, it comes down to that fundamental difference between us and that group of people, which is we are responsible if we're wrong. They are not. And when you start talking about people acting in a professional capacity as opposed to, like, we can kind of begrudge the academics for being academics. They're kind of paid to go explore the fringes of reality, and the expectation is that they're going to get it wrong. Now, granted, they're only supposed to get it wrong 5% of the time.
Well, here's the thing: is you spend most of your, and I can say this one from experience, and I know you know this too to a certain degree. But since before you got out of undergrad, we'll say, you spend most of your time as a scientist being wrong. You spend very little of it being successful and definitely right, like to the point where you wrote the paper and you know it's not going to get overturned ever. Like, most of your time is legitimately spent being wrong. Because you make a hypothesis thinking you're going to get probably some kind of outcome in an experiment, and the experiment just does something completely different, and you go, oh my god, I found something new. Well, that is you being wrong. Period.
And in theory, this is supposed to be limited to random chance, and random chance is supposed to be limited 5% of the time. But the only problem is that what you have is you have a problem of known knowns, which is what you're examining, known unknowns, which are things that could crop up, and then there's unknown unknowns, where even if you took your problem and you put it in a box and you examined it in this box, there could be some characteristic that you are completely and totally unaware of, and from a first principle basis would have no idea how that would happen, and it will fuck you. So it is kind of expected that you're going to be above 5%. When we start getting into 80%, that's a bit of a problem, which is what the replication crisis has as an issue. But when Craig and I get pissed off at Fauci, even though we disagree on masks, and even though, actually, we don't really disagree on masks. We don't really disagree on lockdowns.
We disagree largely on the personal acceptance of certain risks and the degree to which people should be cognizant of these risks on a day-to-day basis versus when they should make a major decision on whether or not they should just forget about these risks.
Right.
That boils most of the arguments down.
It's a risk analysis, and that's basically
and people need to hear these kind of things where people do disagree, because then they get more perspective than they would have from, say, Fauci walking out there and just saying, yeah, you don't need to wear them. Like, well, why?
Or, Fauci coming out and saying, I have been to all of the, I've been to every single one of the bathhouses, and I know all about AIDS now. But, yeah, that's a good deep cut right there. But I actually do have something that is really fitting. I'd like to just do a quick reading of Richard Feynman. Yeah. Please do.
We're close.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I keep trying to get there, and
this
Craig
is a beautiful cherry on top. So please do.
So the final fuckery do of what Fauci did is that he chose to basically not stick to his guns. He didn't come up with an informed opinion that he chose to stick with. He basically caved to political pressure, which is the one thing of all things that it is like a violation of. We have an entire ethics course and an ethics section.
Several,
this is how you fail that section. He basically did that.
Here's the thing: if you say the bridge isn't safe, and the public says, "I want to go," and you go, "Okay, the bridge is kind of safe," and people drive on it and it collapses. You know whose fault it is, right? It's not the motorist, it's you.
So when I come in and I say, hey, I think Fauci was telling the truth, or when Craig comes in and says, oh, he thinks that Fauci was lying initially, right? Our initial perspective on his statements are probably based on our perspectives, which we've largely talked about. When he changed his opinion in response to public pressure, that pisses both of us off.
That's universally bad.
Because it means that either A, he wasn't sitting there, either A, it's in Craig's court where he actually lied, or B, he's decided to be dishonest because it's politically convenient for him to do so while he's operating in a professional capacity. And that is why our blood boils and we get into heated arguments over whether or not this shit is true or false.
Well, we can all agree that Fauci is a really shitty guy.
It is. He is.
And like I said, he very conveniently remembers when he has professional capacity and when he doesn't. Whenever he's being asked an uncomfortable question, oh, no, he can't opine on things because that would be outside of his purview as blah, 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 whoever the fuck he is. But when he's out there on CNN or ABC or whoever the fuck else, oh, yeah, he's going to tell you all about when he thinks that things are going to go back to normal. I don't know if normal is going to be a thing anymore. We could be wearing masks into 2055. Who the fuck knows? At that point, he is no longer acting in a professional capacity, but you notice that he never demarcates that. He's always just kind of saying shit. They go, oh, but he's Dr. Fauci. He's important, and he has opinions. And these are the opinions that are the correct opinions, because otherwise he wouldn't be Dr. Fauci.
And when we start talking about things like the vaccines, regardless of whether, even though I have access to it, I won't take it, or Craig's view that he's pissed off that he doesn't have access to it, the bottom line is we can both agree that it is really fucking retarded for Fauci to go up there and say, even if you take your vaccine, even if you're sick and you've already cleared the infection, you still have to follow all of these other things that are kind of odious and tedious and you have travel restrictions.
And forgiving like the longer term on that, like we can even disagree on we can disagree on anything because we're just kind of assholes like that. Like we can like agree to disagree on where the boundary of that fuzziness extends towards when we're talking about something like herd immunity. But certainly, when it comes to saying shit like, oh, we'll probably be wearing masks all the way through 2023 or 2024.
Right. That's a bad fucking idea.
That is so, like, you have to purposely drive public policy towards maintaining a pandemic to achieve a goal like that. Achieve that as a legitimate thing.
If you don't have an exit strategy, then your professional opinion means nothing at all.
Like that tells me that somebody is planning on the pandemic being around that long, and while it's good to have plans for bad scenarios, worst case scenarios, etc., planning on something like that and then operating as if that is your primary use case, your primary scenario,
or goal even, one might argue.
It's unconscionable to sit there and say something like that and suggest that we're not going to be able to get through something like this because you have to plan public policy
right.
on that.
At the end of the day, we're coming through this one way or another. If everything turned out to be ineffective, guess what? We're ending the lockdown protocols and we're ending the mask mandates because it doesn't fucking matter.
Here's the thing:
or,
even if we ended
alternatively,
the species,
it does matter. Well, I mean, even if it does matter,
but you know.
The bottom line is we are coming out of it, right? It's either going to be something that we just learn to live with, in which case we're dropping infection protocols because we're just going to get sick and we accept that eventuality. Or you're sitting there and you're dropping the protocols because you have a hard scientific value for when this stuff is coming down.
Here's the thing we can do. We can look at past pandemics, and we can look at the technology that was available at the time. We can look at the protocols that were used at the time. For example, we go back to 1918, the Spanish flu. There were anti-mask people now, and there were pro-mask people, and the extremes on either of these elements were equally insufferable as they are today.
I would say they were less insufferable than they are today. I mean,
the major difference at the time was that the masks that were available were made of cheesecloth, which I hope you know is not effective at stopping just about anything but a fucking fly. So.
And will again make things worse for all of the reasons that cloth masks make things
Actually, funny enough, they're large enough holes that it would probably not be as significant a problem as a cloth mask.
Well, you're still going to get that accumulator effect inside the
fiber. You will still get that saturation and wind tunneling effect. The difference is that your wind tunnels are now a millimeter square.
This is true.
So, like that wind tunnel is more. It's
more of a wind hallway.
It's the difference between your wife on wedding night and a windsock up on the tower. Like, not to be crude, right?
Well, I mean,
it's the difference between the pristine sandwich you see at the McDonald's sign and the roast beef sandwich that you actually get at Arby's.
I mean, if you weren't being crude enough already.
Yeah, I know. It is always a shame to pick up something at Arby's. You're like, I really want a pastrami sandwich. And you're just like, you pick it up, you're like, so this is what it's come to in my life.
Where did I fuck up today? Right here.
You know what? I want a pastrami right now. Like, that's what I need. I need to...
So we talk about clapped out roast beef, and you're all of a sudden hungry for pastrami. Interesting.
I love pastrami, but oddly enough, in my region of New York, we don't have any really great delis.
That's
so like
up, you know.
It really is. So like if you're on like Route 95 and you're getting towards the city, anywhere in that entire corridor from Connecticut all the way to New York City, you can pretty much pull over at any exit, and there's going to be some Jewish deli there, and it's amazing because they stack a sandwich like a foot tall.
Right. Like
But out here, like, we don't have any really great sandwich restaurants. Like, even back in New England, you have Papa Gino's and D'Angelo's. And D'Angelo's is the sub shop, and it's amazing.
Right.
It's just amazing. But nothing. I don't know
before
where
all
to get
this,
pastrami out here.
Before all this, we did get to Steve's point, so this was the sidetrack before we got to Evan's thing.
Yeah, not even a point, just something to kind of put a cherry on this particular topic. Well, pastrami, as you say, it does evoke a sense of wonder, so there's a bit of a segue there, sure. Anyway, I'm going to just read a quote from Feynman, and it kind of fits our current situation.
Feynman's amazing.
He is. Feynman's
Excellent
just
positive
great,
cover.
like top tier science dude. But anyway, I'll just read. This is from it's Ode to a Flower. I have a friend who's an artist and has sometimes taken a view which I don't agree with very well. He'll hold up a flower and say, "Look how beautiful it is," and I'll agree. And then he says, "I, as an artist, can see how beautiful this is, but you, as a scientist, take all this apart and it becomes a dull thing." And I think he's kind of nutty. First of all, the beauty that he sees is available to other people and to me too, I believe. I can appreciate the beauty of a flower. At the same time, I see much more about the flower than he sees. I could imagine the cells in there and the complicated actions inside, which also have a beauty. I mean, it's not just beauty at this dimension, at 1 centimeter. There's also beauty at smaller dimensions, the inner structure, also the processes. The fact that the colors of a flower evolved in order to attract insects to pollinate it is interesting. It means that insects can see color. It adds a question: does this aesthetics?
Technically they see UV.
Oh, yeah.
That's a color.
Indeed.
It's not a color.
If it's a wavelength, it's a color.
We're getting off topic, goddammit. Let me finish. That's the question: does this aesthetic sense also exist in the lower forms? Why is this aesthetic? At what all kinds of interesting questions which the science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and all of a flower. It only adds. I don't understand how it subtracts. So the science gives us more interesting questions. You know, it's better to shine light into the dark places.
Well, this is actually a common critique that if you're an engineer or a scientist, you have to deal with. I've got a fantastic one that my current course that I'm in is just a pacing course for my nuclear engineering program, and the professor opened with a joke, and this is a solid joke, similar social commentary, right? And the joke goes that one engineer sees his buddy ride up to him on a really nice bike, and the other engineer goes to his buddy and he says, "Where'd you get the bike?" And the second engineer, whoever was on the bike, says, "Well, you know, the weirdest thing happened to me the other day. I was walking home, and a beautiful woman rode up to me on the bike, ripped off all her clothes, and said, 'Take whatever you want.' And the first engineer turns to his buddy and says, 'You're right, the clothes probably wouldn't have fit.'" Right? So...
Fair.
The point of the joke is that you miss the naked, beautiful woman who is offering herself to you, right, as an engineer. And these are the kind of critiques that we're kind of used to dealing with and fielding. And I think even my wife offered something similar when I was talking about, like, oddly enough, the wavelengths of light associated with the sunset. So you get this perspective in the non-science people that somehow the simplicity of something makes it more appealing. And I suspect that that's kind of true, but I see it more along the lines of a well-dressed woman. I am much more interested in what's underneath the clothing than I am in the dress itself.
Well, that's the funny thing, isn't it? Is you have these... A lot of the times, the beauty that comes out of the phenomena that we do study comes out in the descriptions of them, because they're usually so simplistic in that sense. For instance, one of the Millennium Prizes is for proving the existence of general solutions to Navier-Stokes. The Navier-Stokes equations are fucking beautiful, and they're very compact and simple. But they describe and prescribe to a certain degree very, very complex behaviors. And we don't know if there's a general solution to them. And that's awesome.
So for folks who don't know what this is, the Stokes equation is an equation associated with flow around bodies in a fluid, right? That's really what it is. And the Stokes equation is incredibly important, but we can only solve it in limited ranges. So
Navier-Stokes, goddammit, you gotta have the full thing.
I'm not going, no. Stokes. Nobody cares about Nadia. Stokes equation. And this is the kind of thing like...
You do care if you fly, man.
When... No, I don't. I still don't care. Because it only matters in reactors. I'm not an aerospace engineer. Nobody gives a shit about planes. They fly by gnomes who carry them with falcons and peregrines and griffins.
Pixie dust and uniform parts.
I was going to say, that's the wall pixies in a completely different light.
We strap a whole bunch of geese, I think, and that's
the wall
how planes
pixies
go
would be
up.
the wall pixies for the uninitiated would be electricity.
Which, by the way, it's
But
the
now
same
we have
thing.
now we
My
have the
computer-
underpants gnomes flying airplanes.
My computer is operated by a series of gnomes rapidly carrying colored pieces of paper to my monitor. I'm pretty convinced about that.
Those are some skinny gnomes.
Oh, here's the information you need, by the way.
Well, I mean, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin?
6.
Depends on the
Dogbert
side of the
figured it out. Don't you dare question.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But ultimately what you're dealing with when you're dealing with the Nadia-Stokes equation, I'll use it just because he's being
Thank
a
you.
little bitch.
I will be.
I know you will be, because that's all you know how to be.
Hey, it got me what I wanted. I'm going to take it.
Okay. Well, for as long as I feel like talking. So basically what we use Stokes flow regimes. And within each regime, we'll pick like a particle size. And we can accurately describe that particle based on its size and its shape within a certain region of flow. And we can pick larger and larger and larger.
Flow, by the way.
And we can pick larger and larger things, but we can't actually use the original equation to describe any one of those regions because it's far too complex. And, you can actually... So, by the way, fun fact, the way I found out that Mercedes Carrera was an engineer was I was flicking through her pictures, and then I saw the Stokes flow equation at the end of her friggin' profile bio, because why the fuck else would you have it there? I was like, what the fuck is this? You're either an aerospace engineer or a chemical engineer. There's one of the two.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's only two groups of people who, A, know what it is, and we just operate in different
B,
regions.
you would think it's cool enough to put on a profile.
Right, exactly. No, I'm going to even go with know what it is.
Fair enough. Well, do you put in... Do you just use the first viscosity, or do you use the second viscosity? Because you're only cool if you use the second viscosity, too.
I, as a functioning nuclear engineer, don't give a shit about viscosity.
Yeah, you see, you're not cool.
No, I'm way cool. I play with the substance that makes up the atoms that operate in making your viscosity.
I use
I
atoms.
don't give a fuck about that viscosity.
I use atoms.
No, you don't. You use a part of the atom. A very
My name's
small,
Steve, and I use the whole atom.
I use the whole fucking thing. And the quarks, damn it. Don't forget the quarks.
I bitch the protons, and they turn to the neutrons and say, you want to shut them up and leave?
Nobody
Said,
cares.
yeah, hold on a minute. I'm going to split and turn into a proton, an electron, and anti-electron neutrino because I can't handle this shit anymore.
I don't think any one nuclear reaction does all of that at the same time.
It ejects the neutron spontaneously splits. It's multiple steps.
Yeah, but...
That's why it's less likely to occur.
I guess so. It's not typically we just do like a reaction at any given time. We assume that delta T goes to 0 for all of our equations.
This is why you're not a physicist, you're a nuclear engineer.
Okay, just to bring
That's
this
right.
down to everybody's head level, delta equals T? Question mark?
Delta T.
Delta T. So essentially the region of time in which you're considering something to happen. Right? So if I throw a
physicists
ball...
will care about how long, for instance, a neutron exists as just a neutron outside of a nucleus before it splits and then does stuff like electron, like beta decay.
Or to
Right,
clarify
so
a little bit more,
essentially-
delta being a vector.
No, delta is a differential. It is a
differential.
period.
Sorry.
So essentially, and this is actually what most of calculus is based off of, is examining a very, very, very infinitesimally small chunk of some variable of interest.
Of a thing.
Right. So, and when we start talking about nuclear reactions, because they happen at relativistic velocities and on Planck scales, we don't really care about time all that much because it's kind of irrelevant.
A lot of times we're talking about picosecond or less time scales here. So oftentimes less. Like your neutrino capture is probably going to be on the order of a picosecond because we're talking about an extreme of the weak force. But the rest of these kind of interactions take way less time than that.
Like for instance,
that's effectively 0 seconds.
What's the average velocity of particles in the air? Like 2,000 meters per second, something like that.
It depends on on a room temperature. It's like 200.
Is it 200?
I thought it was 200. Yeah. No. It's between 2 and 400. It's because it's the speed of sound.
Got it. Yep.
343 meters per second at room temperature and pressure.
So
standard temperature and pressure.
Your neutron that goes in and splits a U-235 atom is traveling at about 340 meters per second or feet per second or whatever you just said. And the second that it enters the nucleus, the period of time that it takes to get from the electron outer shell to the nucleus is like infinitely longer than the period of time for that atom to explode. That's what we're talking about for differential timescale. So we typically examine these things on very, very finite timescales or very finite distance scales. When Craig or I does an equation describing a vat of goo, right? We'll examine that differential volume or differential concentration changes over time.
One of the things that makes us different in the way that we do things, and this goes all the way back to undergrad training and so on, is one of my specializations is analytical model formulation. So what I'll end up doing is including some more of the extra stuff that happens in the variables, extra terms in an equation. Think of it like a slightly longer sentence, but has a more complete description, maybe a couple more adjectives in there.
Right.
And I'll synthesize a better way of describing something that is still algebraically or differentially solvable, that it's not a numerical solution, or at least get me close enough so that a numerical solution either converges faster or converges to a more precise answer or more accurate answer, instead of just using the equations, what have you. So I'm good at doing stuff like that. So when we talk about, this is the difference here between, say, also in this specific instance, like a nuclear engineer's approximation of what happens inside the atom, where effectively it explodes instantaneously, versus what a physicist might talk about, which is like, well, what about, the time for this force carrier to make it from this part to this part, etc. What about the cascade failure that causes the fracture, and then there's a rearrangement time that causes the two nuclei to separate, blah, 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 blah.
You could say it's splitting hairs, but it kind of isn't. I mean, because these things do matter.
Yeah, in some contexts.
To put it into perspective, when I cracked the joke about viscosity, which probably nobody cared about,
right,
and it was only funny to us.
Yeah.
The time frame that I'm used to dealing with is so short that we can almost consider time to have stopped for everything. And by the time we start examining the relationship on a viscosity level in comparison to what I'm used to analyzing,
right,
the time difference between his forces that matter in his stuff is essentially the amount of time away from me giving a shit about the heat death of the universe.
Right.
It is literally that
it's
difference.
Definitely, yeah. We're talking about like 40 or 50 orders of magnitude of difference here.
Right.
And it's
to put it in any kind of understandable kind of context.
Well, hold on a second. I think that's roughly the amount of seconds that the universe has existed, right?
Heat death?
No, 40 or 50 orders. What's the? Hold on a second. Let me just Google this shit. Number of seconds.
Well, it's what? The universe is
13.7
billion years times 3,600 per hour times 24 times 365.
Blah blah
You
blah.
engineers are
Approximately a stupidly large number: 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 digits. Okay, so it's even more than that. Imagine taking the number of seconds that the universe has existed squared. It's roughly that number, roughly that kind of difference here.
Enormous.
Plus or minus 10 orders of magnitude, if you will.
Essentially, by the time Craig gets around to solving a problem, I'd be bored to death, and many, many times over dead.
Which is an easy way for me to go ahead and get rid of him.
Yeah. That's all right. I'll just blow your shit up from within.
Yeah, but after I solve the problem.
Boy, this is a weird kind of attrition.
Welcome to engineering.
Fair. Now,
you saw a law-abiding citizen, right? We don't have to be in the room with you.
Electrical engineers go into electrical engineering because it's very safe. That's why they have their safe spaces and their spectacle goggles that they push up there. Mechanical engineers go into mechanical engineering because they don't really know what they want to do.
Because I like hammers.
The chemies, we want to see what happens when shit blows up. And
what happens if I add these two together?
Are taking the fascination with making things explode and saying, hey, I can get 1,000,000 times more energy if I do it this way.
That's a reasonable summation.
When you describe it that way, it sounds a lot more fun.
And aerospace engineers are the ones that go, I want to go fast, but not on the ground.
Aerospace engineers, yeah,
they're the ones who walk around and say, did you know penguins fly but underwater?
Now, you know what? Aerospace engineers are the ones who turn around and violate their ethical codes and let the plane go because it's profitable for the company.
Oh, yeah. Just put Max at the end. People will think it's better.
That's right.
Oh, Boeing.
Aerospace engineers charge you more
Not
for
just
the
the Max
package.
Not just the Max 8.
The aerospace engineers just charge more for the safety package. That's how it works out.
I thought, and they don't give you peanuts because why the hell would you have a convenience on a flight?
Not anymore.
The first nuclear engineers, when they were doing the Manhattan Project, there was a pool as to what level of detonation they were actually going to get, and it ranged from we are going to get nothing, all the way to we incinerate the entire solar system by accident.
Yeah, we set off the planet's atmosphere, and then the planet explodes.
That was an actual legitimate concern that it would be a cascade effect like that.
Well, we didn't know there was a twofold thing here. We didn't know the strength of the triple bond between nitrogen atoms, and we didn't know the stability of the nitrogen atom. So we thought we might be able to fuse nitrogen and oxygen after a nuclear bomb goes off. And if you think a little nuclear bomb going off is bad, imagine the entire fucking atmosphere fusing. Right. And then basically making our planet turn into a miniature sun.
Right.
For a very brief period.
That was what they were slightly concerned about.
Because if the nitrogen triple bond is not strong enough, then it's easy for oxygen to attack the nitrogen atom and rip it off of the other nitrogen atom and gain energy out of fusing.
Yep.
And if that's a net positive energy outcome, which it is not, thankfully, then it's possible for a cascade of this to happen at the shockwave interface of the explosion.
And that's horror.
That is
why absolute horror.
Upset.
This is actually the same kind of thing that ends up happening when you start talking about the LHC.
Yeah, with black holes.
There was the dude who was really concerned that we could possibly create a black hole.
But here's the thing: is if that was possible, then the cosmic rays coming into our upper atmosphere are doing this all the time and making much larger black holes.
Well, no, I mean, so my understanding is that it is possible, and it is possible within this machine.
But again, if it's happening, it's definitely happening up there too, all the time and at much higher energies.
And at the end of the day, it turns out that the matter that makes up black holes disintegrate extremely rapidly.
Yes,
and so
explosively.
Sometimes explosively.
Well, the lifetime is inversely proportional to the temperature to the fourth power, and thus the size of the black hole to the fourth power. So, if these things, the smaller they get, the faster they evaporate.
Right.
And it's explosive. It's not explosive in terms of detonation versus deflagration. It's just explosive in the way that it rapidly accelerates until there's nothing left.
So even if we did create a black hole, it would live for femtoseconds.
It would not. It would never reach the side of the LHC's tube.
And even if it did reach the side of the LHC's tube, it wouldn't be able to pull matter fast enough because there wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be massive enough. It's only going to still be roughly 2 protons mass.
Yeah, say it actually had like the best luck in the world and struck 2 atoms in a row of niobium.
Yep.
It would still not have enough mass to evade.
To survive.
Yeah, it would never hit a 3rd atom.
Yeah.
And this is like we're out many nines out there on the 99.99, like for the chance of this just not happening. You know, we're talking 1 in a trillion or less now.
So thankfully, basically, these things are relatively safe.
Yeah, so like I said, this would be happening in our upper atmosphere all the time from cosmic rays at a much higher total amount of this would be happening. Like there's only about 200,000 protons in one of these packets that from either side in the beam that strikes, and only a handful of those actually do have head-on collisions. And of those head-on collisions, only a fraction of the collisions per day, and they're doing hundreds or thousands of these packets per day, because they accelerate many of them at a time. So of all of these collisions per day, you're talking about less than 1 chance in a year of a black hole being made in the first place, just due to the energies involved. The upper atmosphere has like 1 million times more energy in each of the collisions that happen between an interstellar proton or helium nucleus or what have you that comes in. That pretty much near almost the speed of light. Way higher energy than the shit that's going on in the LHC.
I don't know if I would go with near the speed of light, but it is, very high.
The stuff that's happening in the LHC is already near the speed of light. Let's just get that clear. So when I say near the speed of light, it's putting an emphasis there that's unfortunately not in the proper context. Again,
there's
a million times more energy.
There's a lot of feet between here and the speed of light.
The average collision energy in the upper atmosphere from cosmic rays slamming into our atmosphere is about 100 times higher than what happens in the LHC. That's the average. The spread on that is gigantic. So most of them are higher. Most of them are just going to be way higher energy than the LHC. The point is here that the energy gets converted into a black hole if a black hole is going to form. These black holes would be larger than what we'd be able to form inside the LHC. And again, the momentum here has to be conserved. So supposing that the energy is primarily from the kinetic energy of the incident cosmic ray, that would still be traveling, for sake of argument, at half of the speed of light towards the surface of the planet. That's very fast, and it would take no time to get there, and it would still evaporate before it had gotten an inch.
Pretty much. And just as a quick callback to last week's episode where I pitched sitting there and launching a whole bunch of drilling machines into the moon, that is one of the other reasons and advantages for the subterranean dwarven moon base.
Right.
Because most of these are charged particles, and it would significantly reduce the radiation exposure just going down a few feet into the ground than having a thin
mylar and lead.
Yeah.
So like that's the thing is a moon base is only really going to take off as a thing if you get proper shielding involved, and you're not going to find that in a plastic surface.
We cannot launch.
And I know
it would cost a lot more to launch a sufficient amount of lead into space than it would to just simply tunnel into the ground.
Yeah, there's perfectly good Earth there. Well, not Earth.
And let's not forget that the moon is made out of part of the planet, pretty much. Yep. We're pretty certain about that now. That the collision that rapidly fucked up the Earth resulted in our moon. And that, if just by that alone, we know there's enough radioactivity inside of that satellite for us to be able to go down a little bit into the surface and find ourselves a modicum of warmth that we can take advantage of as a heat differential and a potential source of energy as well. So it wouldn't just have to be the stuff at the surface. You go down far enough, you get geothermal effectively.
It's
geothermal,
It's possible. The problem that you're going to have is so our geothermal is a mixture of some gravitational torquing of our molten core.
Right.
Somehow
I say it's shitty geothermal at best.
But
most
likely we'd still be tossing up a nuclear reactor. A lot of people have pitched solar panels. Unfortunately, micrometeorites would make solar panels much easier.
Here's the thing: is you have enough surface material there that once you strip out all the useful fuel materials, like say helium-3, you're left with basically glassy rock, and you can just use that to make. You can extract the silicon out of that because we're talking about roughly the same material as the mantle of the Earth. There's plenty of silicates.
Sure.
And you could make yourself more solar panels. The problem, like you said, micrometeorites are a big issue. You'd basically be making solar panels at roughly the speed they're being destroyed if you crank them out constantly.
Yep. If you had a full, that's one of the reasons.
And you'd just be causing a lot more debris because then you have the particulates that get blown off. You have really low gravity, and they can travel around the fucking moon, come back, and break the next set of solar panels.
The upside is at least, unlike on the Earth when you put up solar panels, it is not going to be creating a toxic waste hazard because nobody lives on the surface of the moon.
Well, there's that. And if you do get toxic waste, you can just shoot it out because it's much easier to lift off ejecta from 1/6 the gravity of the planet.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why
it's easier in that particular regard. Throw it to the sun.
But
well, that actually would take more energy.
Yeah, actually kind of just throw it in the Earth.
You can actually inject it into a lunar orbit around the moon, and then, or you could just store it on the other side of the moon because who the fuck's going to go there? Well, actually, you know what you should do is send it to the Russo-Chinese site.
That's right. There you go.
Because that was something I wanted to bring up before. Actually, I did bring it up. How that's a major problem. That's actually a way to fix it. Just make their site so toxic they can't live there. Kill it around them. Like just take it. Flip the rover upside down just to prove a point too.
All I can say is this past week in terms of Clown World, the most worrying thing is how China is reacting to us. They didn't pull this shit with Trump. Because Trump would fucking eat them alive.
Or how Biden's admin flat out fucking isn't reacting to China. Did you see that fucking thing with the meeting between our Secretary of State and
what a
their
shit show.
Yeah.
We were made to look
just like, America's garbage and it's hot garbage and we don't like you, and his thing's like, well, from what I'm seeing, our numbers say, like, just Blinken, go home.
Yeah,
like we'd be better off with Blinken from the fucking Men in Tights movie.
I am absolutely stunned, right? And I really hope that all those people who hated Trump are kind of like realizing what he was actually dealing with, because now we've got a border crisis. The Biden administration has said, yeah, it actually is a crisis,
and it's also their fault.
No, that was corrected. It is a challenge. Just like the election was fortified.
It's back to being a challenge with red ink.
Yeah.
Well, they're just fortifying the terminology, that's all.
Did you check out the comic it links?
Oh, yeah, I've got that. Yeah, it's great. I'm going to link it for everybody. It's not even worth describing because it really just kind of encapsulates the love of science that a real scientist has.
Oh my god, it's moving. It's so cute.
Oh my god. I used to really love XKCD.
Yeah, Inman kind of... Not Inman, he was the other guy. Inman was, what the fuck was that one? It's the... Oh, goddamn, I even have some of his comics somewhere.
Now, there was one other thing that I was wanting to cover this week that actually you linked to me around the end of the week there, Steve. It's the you're saying that the Union of Concerned Scientists is not a great organization?
Fuck them. So if you want to turn around and talk about, like, the biggest thing in the culture wars that somehow, in the age of information, we haven't fucking gotten over, it's concerned trolling. And nobody is as good at concerned trolling as the Union of Concerned Scientists. Because that's all they are, is concerned trolls. They get concerned about everything.
Yeah.
And really, let's be very specific. It is everything that doesn't fit the most progressive agenda possible.
There are a bunch. Whenever they say something, I either flat out don't care or assume the opposite is better.
So as a thing, and the reason I link this is because it was actually what I was talking about last week. The thing that pisses me
They
off
want to build a moon base?
No. So when you start talking about the Union of Concerned Scientists, they're the group that's going to go out there, and just because Trump got elected, they moved the hands of the clock to a minute to midnight.
Yeah, that part.
Solely because a Republican won.
I hope that that's gonna happen again real soon, and they're just gonna be like, oh, we're they're gonna have to update the fucking song. It's 2 seconds to midnight now.
They moved it back because Biden won. They moved it back because the Democrats took some seats in the House, which was solely due to a bunch of Republicans.
I got what we need to do. We need to have a clock that gets ever closer to them finally changing their fucking twisted knickers. It's insane.
Yeah, will they ever get that twist out of their panties?
I don't know, man. I don't know. The thing that pissed me off in this article was basically they turned around and they came out and they said advanced nuclear is not any safer than conventional nuclear, which was actually a discussion that we were having last week, which was my statement is that we're dealing with hazardous
Gen 3 Plus are demonstrably safer than Gen 1 and Gen 2.
Gen 3 Plus are what is defined as advanced nuclear. So their statement is false. What they're talking about is the Gen 4 stuff. And the Gen 4 is like concept reactors that has some serious, like, the upside
Gen 4 has been pie in the sky, by the way, just for perspective here, since at least 2000.
If you
not earlier.
Salt reactors, it goes back to the 1960s.
Like, just as an agreed upon terminology when they finally came up with the generations of reactors.
Yeah.
Like, they really started pushing the idea of Gen 4 around the turn of the millennium as a thing people need to look at as a class category. Look, here's Gen 4. It's the wave of the future. It's coming. It's going to be here around 2050, maybe.
So for perspective, a Gen 2 reactor, which is conventional nuclear, is estimated to have a core problem once every 1,000 reactor years. That doesn't mean it explodes into a fiery mushroom cloud. It just means
a bolt comes loose.
A bolt comes loose, or something that could put some safety at risk, or maybe they have to scrap the plant.
One of your control rods got stuck, and the rest of them worked just fine.
Right.
Shit like that.
So there's probably going to be a little bit of a panic, and they're going to have to monitor the situation. That is your Gen 3. Or Gen 2s. Your Gen 3s and Gen 3 Pluses is like one reactor core event every 100,000 to a million years. Because
reactor years, mind you.
Reactor years, right?
Yeah.
So if I build a plant 100,000 years after that plant has been built, at some point in that period of time, there might be a problem.
So the way this scales, just so that people understand, if you have more reactors, then you have more reactor years per year.
Right.
Just by this should be obvious, but just
so
that's the way it scales.
If I had 100 reactors, I'd have a chance of having one event in sometime over the next 1,000 years with those 100 reactors. Now, that is your Gen 3s. Your Gen 3 Plus, I think, pushes it up over 1 million, which is
Probably.
just insane, right?
This is analogous, by the way. This is analogous to what's called the MTBF or MTBE for like a hard drive, so the mean time between failures.
Yes.
And just to clarify too, that's any failure, not just a full meltdown.
No, it could be.
I mean, full meltdown is going to be. It's basically going to be something like 3 Mile Island or Fukushima or any one of the other things that was a crisis that really wasn't. It's not going to be a Chernobyl level event.
Because 3 Mile, there wasn't any event. That's the thing at the end of it. Like, it was an event, but nothing happened, which was the way it was supposed to happen. Nothing happened.
3 Mile Island is basically what happens in a world without cell phones. Their biggest problem was they only had one phone line going into the reactor. So when they called up, basically they were trying to field calls from the control room of the plant to the engineering staff, the governor, and the state town board, and whatever emergency management groups were out there. So basically, and then by the way, the newspapers were sitting there in inflaming public tension, so everybody was freaking out. And this is back when it was switchboards. So by the time you're done,
you have time before before an event actually becomes an event of concern. So suppose you have a reason to shut down, you've got weeks.
The issue that happened at 3 Mile Island is for 4 days, nobody could talk to the plant operators, and somebody didn't know that they had turned off the coolant water. That's what happened at 3 Mile Island. So they turned on the coolant water, and all of a sudden the problem went away.
Yeah.
It is that simple.
And they didn't have any gigantic leak or any of that shit. It was just like I said, a non-event event.
Right. The maximum amount of radiation that anybody was exposed to is roughly equivalent to a chest X-ray. It was basically a whole bunch of nuclides got bunched up in a HEPA filter.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Like it wasn't even a thing. But those kinds of events are there. So you get the Union of Concerned Scientists coming out, and I had a discussion last week on this, saying that when we start talking about our Gen 4 plants, while people are trying to sell them as these super safe things, they are inherently hazardous in other ways, right?
And so suppose they are inherently safe, the major problem that we have with them right now is that they're not going to be ready for decades. Right now they are theoretical designs that need research to be done. It doesn't matter, like, even if they have even if the molten salt part ends up being inherently safer, somehow. If we take out all the other things that make them definitely more hazardous, and they just happen to be safer, they're not happening today, they're not happening in 10 years, which means that by the time you build the plants, they're not going to be outdated. So we need to start building the fucking Gen 3 or 3 Plus plants today.
So what it really comes down to is we can engineer out any hazard. We can make those problems go away. But a lot of people want to rush development on the Gen 4s, and they have a hazard, and we don't know how to mitigate that risk, which means that we're setting ourselves up for failure if we were just headball our way into the MSRs, rather than going through Gen 3 and Gen 3 Plus plants, which are inherently safe. But the Union of Concerned Scientists had the audacity to come out and say they're just not inherently safer because they use hazardous materials. Oh, and they decided
the Union of Concerned Anuses.
They spoke more about nuclear proliferation than anything else, which just pisses me off.
Because they can produce plutonium just like the Gen 4 plants?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that was what they were arguing, is that the Gen 4 could produce nuclear proliferation, and Gen 3 and Gen 3 Pluses...
Gen 4 purposely produces plutonium because it's purposely used as a breeding agent.
The other argument that they were using is that Gen 3s and Gen 3 Pluses increase nuclear proliferation because everywhere we've used them has had a fuel recycling system in place, which means that that terrorists might target those factories.
Yeah,
you know what?
Okay.
If any of you know any asshole in the Union of Concerned Scientists, let me tell you what it's like to be at a nuclear facility. You take a piss in a trough next to a dude who has an M4A1 fully modded out assault rifle, 3 grenades, a sidearm, a taser, and a whole bunch of bear mace and body armor. There is no terrorist organization that is going to intercept nuclear fuel. It's not going to happen. They will be shot faster than you can say they will be shot.
Believable.
Pretty much.
Honestly.
Like, I see dudes who are like tall, big, 6-foot hair, bulky, burly men, and they look like they're wearing a fucking barrel because of how much heat they're packing. And I have to walk by those guys every fucking day. Like, they have to order they have to go to the cafeteria and eat in the lunchroom with
next to all you puny men.
Yes. Yeah, if I wanted to be a real manly man, I would have chosen a very different career.
Well, who knows? Maybe it'll be all the Iron Man.
They run drills. They run drills while the reactor's down, where they literally go around doing paintball through the site while people are working on the reactor, because that's how... I think they're bored. But
I think
that's
it does
how
sound kind of fun.
prepared they are.
Yeah, they're prepared to play paintball is what they are. Don't you dare start thinking that shit analogous. It's not. Oh God, I got hit by a paintball through my giant fucking vest.
But most of these guys are ex-military. There's a huge demand for ex-military folks.
Yeah.
They have police-level powers. They have all of the response equipment that you could possibly want, ranging from dark SUVs to, boats. And it's not going to be a terrorist stealing fuel as it goes to a uranium shipment facility is so unlikely. And plus, it's only at 1% enrichment. It's not enough.
The thing is, the stuff that gets pulled out for research level activities for purification for later is so small in quantity. We're talking micromolar quantities here or less. Oftentimes your plutonium samples are going to be nanomolar. So, the kinds of quantities that might even be refined for outside usage are so tiny that it's not practical to even make a dirty bomb with these. You couldn't take a vial of this stuff, this slightly blue plutonium nitrate solution, and put it into a grenade or whatever, and then create a dirty bomb hazard. It's just not enough
you could.
Stuff.
It's just not going to affect.
It's just not enough stuff in it. You'd affect 20 square feet.
Maybe. And then we come in with a power washer, drain it down the sewer, and we wouldn't be able to detect it from background.
Right. This is what I mean. There's not enough of it to do something. This is all way less than you need to make a bomb.
But this
way less.
is when we start talking about the Union of Concerned Scientists coming in and being anti-nuclear, what they're trying to do is promote renewable energy, which doesn't work. It's never worked on any scale. It makes every system much more complicated and expensive to operate. Right? We don't have a solution for the energy storage problem.
It's funny. I know it has zero to do with us, but I like to think that we had something to do with it. Recently, this last week, I saw a slew of channels that I follow come out and were like, "Oh yeah, we should do nuclear. Nuclear energy is the way."
Yeah.
For instance, Kyle Hill, who does the Because Science channel or what have you, he has his own channel and he does his own thing. But this week he had a video, why it's time for nuclear, and he was coordinating with the U.S. government on that one just for nuclear outreach. I saw several other channels. Again, like I said, there was a slew of them. I guess it was just coordination with the same kind of folks that came out and were just it's time for nuclear, and it really fucking is.
It's been part of the zeitgeist for the last obviously I'm much more sensitive to it than I think most people are, just because it's
Probably.
my line of work. But it's actually been in the zeitgeist a lot more often. The only problem is that the people who want to sit there and talk about climate change don't want to talk about nuclear.
Well, it's because it solves their problem and it makes them irrelevant.
Exactly. So what you have is the Democrats, and this was one of the things is they spent a significant amount of effort on the various debates, both for the primary and in the presidential, talking about climate change and their solutions for it, and they just basically didn't talk about nuclear. It wasn't that they had an issue with nuclear; they just didn't acknowledge it existed.
It's kind of like the Tyson plant, the pilot plant that did chicken gasification that made octane.
Oh yeah.
And then there's also the pilot studies on turning CO2 from the air into octane.
Oh yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Capture.
The major problem here is that these things solve the problem by creating closed loop solutions, and they don't like the fact that it solves the problem without using a fucking solar panel. And while I think solar is still a valid technology to look into, specifically for exterior applications, wind is certainly not.
So oddly enough, from an engineering standpoint, I have less issues with wind than I do solar. That being said, from an environmental standpoint, I think that neither one is good from an environmental standpoint.
Neither one's
but at least
good, but solar is better.
Yeah, at least from an environmental stand. Well, see, and even then, it's tough because it produces a ton of e-waste. Like
Well, that's the thing is it's gotten to the point where there's an incentive to start recycling it responsibly, which is good.
There isn't.
There is an incentive, but it's just not. So if the government would stop subsidizing the fucking solar panels, that incentive would finally become priced appropriately.
That's possible, but it's still significantly more expensive.
That would also significantly decrease the new deployments, and also, without the new deployment current numbers, if the new deployments went down substantially, then the price point for the recycling would also have to go down significantly. Unfortunately, that's the way it breaks down. So even if you take away subsidies, you're still going to be at a point where there's a price point disadvantage.
Right, and no matter what you do,
that's an admittable problem right there.
Yep. There are I can get behind the idea of solar. The only problem is they're pretty much useless after 20 years because they're not going to be outputting the same level of power. It's a giant e-waste problem. If you stick it on your roof, I have less of an issue than if you bulldoze a forest. Right? Like that's really what
I would say like the main place to put solar into use right now is basically any surface on a building that's facing the sun.
And that's where I can kind of get into it.
That's the place where I think it has the best chance of hitting these kind of price points in the first place, because then you have a building that is able to, say, run its entire HVAC without any kind of extra power.
And that's
and
like
when it's needed, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've got your power during the day when you got your heat.
Yeah.
And I can see that kind of a thing having an impact. The only problem is, you'd still need it at night because you don't want to have your HVAC.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool down, start up, all that stuff.
Still, the point is that you're basically getting something for nothing on cladding your building with solar.
If they didn't have the subsidies in place and solar prices were such that it was cost effective to put them on building roofs, and they sat there and they put in a cost charge associated with recycling the panels,
sure.
I would have no issue with that going forward. As you take out the subsidies,
makes sense,
take out the incentives, and if it financially is cost effective, we build the solar panels, right?
I'm right on board with that.
Yeah, that's how we should be running most of these green technologies. If they can make the money and pay for their own way, then yeah, absolutely. It just means it's a good technology.
The thing is that they always come out. They come out every single year. They're like, look at how cheap it is. We're the cheapest form of power available. And then you're like, all right, well, let's pull the subsidies. And they're like, no, we can't pull the subsidies. And you're like, well, why?
Because in California, the subsidies are the only fucking reason anybody has them.
And that and the federal, the state mandates.
Yeah.
But the issue is that, and literally, like, you'll see this with wind in particular, because wind was arguing how they were cheaper and better and awesome.
Oh, God, I just remember the fucking early 90s when wind was the future of fucking everything. You're going to have giant boats that were all solar and wind, capable of going across the ocean at 100 miles an hour, and everybody was going to be able to do that instead of fly.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that pop sci, and it had that solar and wind-driven catamaran. That would hydroplane. It's like you got. I mean,
kind of like the one that Greta took.
I love the idea of it. It's just like, who's the market for this? Nobody. And who's going to pay for it? Nobody.
I have huge issues with this thing, but it really pisses me off whenever you get something like the Union of Concerned Scientists coming out and shitting on another technology and basically presenting the same arguments that I made, but adding in a whole framing device to make it look worse. And not sitting there and talking about, putting it in perspective.
Again, the Society of Concerned Anuses.
Yeah, Well, I mean, it's concern trolling, right?
Or wet anuses. You can go with that one, too.
That's how we got to this politically correct phase. That's how the problem that we have is somebody goes, I have a concern. And we turn around and we say, well, let's help you with your concern. I want to help you get through that. And we don't just turn around and say, no, your concern is stupid. Go fuck yourself. That's what we need to be at for a society. Your opinion is noted. That's the comment you get back on your notation.
Yeah. Congratulations, you wrote an article.
Right? But Jesus, and
now go shit in the hat.
Routers carried it. Like, this is the other thing that pisses me off, too, is this goes back to what we talked about with
Reuters. Come on, man. I know you can pronounce that one.
I don't give a fuck. It is what I say it is. So routers.
Yeah, until you get corrected.
I don't care. Routers. So routers sat there and published it, but this goes back to something that we've talked about before, is what pisses me off even more than the Union of Concerned Scientists coming up with this bullshit, or, whatever political advocacy group touting, renewable energy, as they often do. Whenever this gets published, all that's stated is that this concern group has voiced their concern, and they don't dig into the claims in any way, shape, or form. They take these reports, which are put out by activist groups, at face fucking value.
Well, we should make our group. We should make a group. Seriously, we'll call it the group of scientists that are always right. And we'll just put out.
We'll be the
union of people that are always right. We'll just put out a thing that says, "Look, you guys are all wrong, and we're right." And then we won't even say about what, and then we'll just say, "Group is correct about things."
What we can do is we can call it the Union of Correct Engineers, right? And all we do is we counter the Union of Concerned Scientists stuff, and then you just need to get a significant enough membership and send that shit to routers.
I mean, I'm sure if you pronounce their name right, they can publish it.
I don't give a shit about their name. Like, they don't deserve to have their name said properly if they're going to publish anything from the Union of Crap Scientists.
I don't know. We'll have to work on getting that name registered or something. I don't know.
I just don't understand why
we'll
they
use the millions that we're making off the show.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't they turn around and why don't any of these newspapers ever actually dig in and do the research?
Because none of them have any staff that can.
Maybe that's the case.
Well, and if they do, they're busy looking for statues that might have some sort of racist past.
Yeah,
or
they're gonna find a
tweets.
statue of Harriet Tubman and fucking say that's racist next, aren't they?
Give them a minute. Give them a minute.
Why aren't there any Asians on our dollar bills, huh?
I'm very surprised by where they've chosen to go. Like in 2014, when I joined Gamergate, I was expecting this shit to die down. Like I thought it was a niche group and it wouldn't hold mass appeal. And then in the 2016 election, when Trump won, I was like, the left will learn not to do this stupid shit. And then all of a sudden,
and then you learn how the left learns. It doesn't.
It does not.
What's this learning?
And then you get to like 2020, and it's like, okay, so they beat Donald Trump. So maybe they were just using it as a power grab, and it's going to go away. Nope, not at all.
Yeah. Welcome to politics in America.
Yeah.
The left's terminally retarded, and it will always get worse.
I don't understand, because the Democrats used
Again,
to be the
the
smart
left,
people.
not liberals.
The Democrats used to be the party of smart people.
Well,
now it's the party of smart people.
It went from predominantly liberal to predominantly left, and that shift has fucked the party. And all the liberals went, I've been displaced. What the hell is going to become of me? And then all the Republicans who are fairly liberal, from the libertarian leaning on things, are just like, well, you probably fit in better over here.
Well, see,
it's still a highly dynamic situation for the two different parties here. Like it's very much in flux. The liberals and the libertarian people are being fought for. Progressives just want to kill all the liberals and libertarian people because none of them are ever going to become progressive drones like them.
Well, it used to be the left wing purity test, and it's gone way beyond that simple purity test. It's like you can't disagree with these people at all. And somehow they think they have a diversity of viewpoints. Because I remember seeing somebody say, hey, there's no actual arguments diverse viewpoints on the right. On the left, there's this huge range. And that's like the actual research shows that when you look at the right, there's a pretty huge diverse range of views on almost every subject.
Yeah,
whereas
you'll find diametrically opposed opinions on, for instance, abortion. Which is typically not described as a thing that is intra-party contention.
Yep.
People who are right and conservative leaning, or right and libertarian leaning, in general in this country have very widely differing views on most subjects. It just happens that they aren't progressive views, that's all.
My wife and I both disagreed on abortion. My point of view was that, yeah, let's go for it. And her point of view is, well, actually, so I've counseled many women to abort their children, and really it's secretly because it's another male's offspring, and I don't really care about it.
Wow, that's yeah.
I am a Darwinist, motherfuckers. Nature is a cruel, harsh mistress.
Yeah, you decide to be her bitch, right?
I'm just the male chimpanzee.
You're nature's beta orbiter. What can I do to help you, honey?
No. I'm the
oh, I see you're having a shitty week. Are you having your period? Let me go get rid of a few babies.
Peak
I'm
milady
the male
hours.
chimpanzee that walks up and says, "Oh, it looks like you're taking care of an infant, and it's not mine. Let me fix that for you."
You know, I appreciate your honesty.
Well, fair enough, but I mean, you're not even offering to replace the thing, so I don't know if that's really fair.
Well, you gotta keep into account there's an Oedipal complex here, and there's also an anti-Oedipal complex. Anti-Oedipal being kill your son before he kills you, and sleeps with your wife. That's why kids are kicked out of the house,
I have no problem, but I mean, so that was actually, in all seriousness, going back to the issue, that was something that my wife and I debated, and my response was like, "What the hell do I care?" And she said, "Don't you think there's a limit?" And initially I was like, "Nah," and then I was like, "All right." I guess I have to say there's kind of a limit. So
96+% of them are elective procedures, meaning has nothing to do with a medical issue.
That's yes.
That's slightly excessive, wouldn't you say?
A little above mean, you could say.
I will say that making a mistake shouldn't haunt you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but at the same time, safe, available, and rare. Wait,
I remember
that one off.
I am the issue that I have is the left comes out and they're like, when it comes to abortion, you're like, yeah, I think that we should rein that in. They go, well, what about rape cases? And you're like, okay, well, let me take a look. Rape cases is like 1% of all abortions.
I think there's if you have a severe medical issue.
Yep.
And you know the kid's gonna die the moment it's born. Right. If the infant's not going to suffer needlessly, and it gives the parents closure, deliver it and have the birth and so on. Otherwise, if it's a risk, do the abortion. Fine. If it's an incest case, well, that's up to Cletus and Joanne to figure that one out.
I mean,
it's a rape case, and that's pretty categorical. Do the thing, but afterwards.
The thing is, there are these absolute exceptions that I would say to any sort of ban on the practice.
Yeah,
right? Without a question, you
can't just have a blanket ban because A, people will do it anyway, which sucks.
Yep.
And B, there's these tragic edge cases which need to be taken into account.
They absolutely do. So a blanket ban doesn't work for me. On the other hand, I also do agree that if you turn around and you make a mistake, right, like kids are fooling around, it happens. I don't necessarily know that, because you were hot and heavy for Kevin, that you should be forced to raise Kevin's kid while he skips off and becomes a deadbeat.
So I got a question here. When it comes to the safe, legal, and rare mantra, do you think when they were saying that shit over and over again, do you think Hillary meant rare as in not fully cooked? You think she just wanted that juicy, lean meat to stay pink?
I don't know. I think that rare was whenever Bill Clinton fucked up. And I'm sure that man...
Safe, legal, and not entitled to my money.
That's exactly right. So it's not when you get pregnant by accident, it's when he gets somebody pregnant by accident. That's what she meant.
Well, we know at least one slipped through, at least according to all the records that exist still. So there's that.
But I can get. So my wife defines it at the heartbeat, and I was like, okay, well, You know, if you walk it from the blastocyst forward, it's very tough to see when that dividing line comes in. But if you go from like baby to is it okay if the woman stabs it through the skull as it's going down the birth canal, obviously probably not a good thing, and she should probably be treated for psychopathy. So there has to be that dividing line.
We have it's very fuzzy, and it's annoying that it's so fuzzy. I think that 20 weeks is probably going to be, you know, it's 20 out of the 40. It's straightforward. I think that's halfway, right?
See, and that's the thing is, if you start talking to people, a lot of people would agree there's a limit, and they have good reasons. Yours, 20 out of 40, is a decent reason.
I only bring that up because that's what people have been using. It's like we know it's a shitty demarcation, but I think we can all agree that if you're halfway through baking the baby, then you should just kind of let it go the rest of the way.
And that's perfectly reasonable. I think that my wife's heartbeat is a reasonable cutoff point.
Yeah. I mean, these are all things like the detecting a heartbeat thing. I think is also pretty straightforward in that it's a yes or no answer.
Yep.
If you put the stethoscope on her womb and you say nothing.
Yep.
Like we know, like that. It's straightforward with that.
See, personally, I think that we should have a moving target, and that moving target should be based on an 80% survival rate with current technology. And the reason for that
is below 20 weeks now, which is nuts.
Well, that's kind of the point, is that if you as a conservative, right, believe so profoundly that anti-abortion should happen, then you can't simultaneously say that you should be forcing that person to carry it all the way to term. So if you were to invest all of that effort and energy and money into better
Well, here's another thing is after a certain number of abortions, or let's say after a certain number of women after a certain number of babies you've given up. How about that? There has to be some kind of tax that comes in on your ass.
I just want to make sure that our host didn't die.
Well, his ring's still going, so he's still transmitting something.
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
You heard my last comment anyway. Even it was pretty witty. I was wondering why you didn't laugh. Jesus.
So well, I mean, I wasn't sure if you were dying, and while I'll happily laugh at the expense of your mortality, it's generally frowned upon. I have learned that painful lesson.
Yeah, I'll totally haunt you. Oh, I can guarantee it.
So I think that after a certain number of children that you have gone in and gotten rid of, basically, like, you know, because we have right now a no questions asked drop-off rule for women. Like, that is a get-out-of-jail-free card, even if you wait until after the baby's born to freak out and go, I don't want it. Like,
and that's true.
Like, that you drop off the kid at the hospital and leave, and they just have no choice but to say, okay, put it in foster care.
And I get that, but I also, like, I don't know. If it was me and I had to make a choice, I would choose to abort if I didn't think I could care for it, right? And that would be my response. Now,
that's what I was saying. Like, there has to be kind of a limit on that too. Like, you know, if you go out and you serially fuck up like that to the point where you go, well, I'm using this as birth control now.
That's
like, at a certain point, you got to say, all right, well, you've got to be disincentivized from doing this because you're now fucking up multiple other lives than your own, and whoever the fuck you happen to be screwing that night.
Yeah, it's kind of dysgenic to put it in a mild way.
I think that the fastest and easiest way to deal with that is to stop subsidizing it.
Well, that's the other thing is I think that in the same sense that a woman is capable of having an abortion, I think that there should be a point where if the guy says I don't want it and she says I do want it, and like it takes two to tango in that sense. Like if it's kind of the same thing here. Like if he says I want the baby and she says I'm getting an abortion. He kind of had, like, you take, if he's not allowed to have that say, then there has to be a reversal of that to some degree in order for fairness to be present.
And I am
a
firm believer in financial abortion. Right?
Yeah, it seems cruel. It seems cruel, but, like, there's...
Well, it is cruel because it's a period.
Well, it's disgusting in my opinion that's even a thing. Like, you should kind of know if the two of you want to have a kid at first. But
well, I mean, you know, again,
besides the point.
Mistakes purportedly happen. So
sure,
like,
absolutely.
I'm either infertile or, you know, I don't really. So I'm not. I don't entirely believe mistakes happen, just because I've never had a kid conceived on me.
But at the same time, like,
and I've had a lot of sex, like a lot of sex. I get sex very, very regularly, and there's been no surprises.
Right, and like again, like, well, this might be a difference here. You know, when we talk about masks and compliance and PPE and shit, you know, just because you're using the product the way it's supposed to be used doesn't mean everyone else is going to.
Well, and that's kind of my point.
Eat shit, I'm right here too.
I totally agree. Like that's one of the things is somebody comes up and says it was a surprise. I'm like, are you sure it was a surprise?
Or was it a drunk surprise?
Like, how much of a surprise is it? I'm told that you kind of know what happened.
Well, let's see. Did the two of you have sex? Oh, yes, we had sex. Did you use a condom every single time? Oh, yes, we did. Did you make sure that you were cleaned off before you went ahead and went in with the next round? Well, maybe we didn't.
Yeah. Protection works pretty damn well these days.
It used to piss me off when I was in the EMT, because when I was in the EMT, I volunteered at the university, and so we'd get a call, and it was always middle of the night, female with abdominal pain, and the first question you ask is, are you sexually active, right? Because you want to make sure it's not an ectopic pregnancy.
Right.
And they'd go, yes. And they go, is there any chance you could be pregnant? And they'd go, no. And you'd be like, oh, my God, are you a moron?
Yep.
Every time.
Yeah, no, I can believe that.
Used to piss me off. That's one of the reasons why I couldn't stand doing it forever. Like, I'm okay with sitting there and helping your ass from a fucking bloody car wreck. But if you answer question A with a yes and question B with a no, then you're lying to yourself and you're lying to me. It's okay if you lie to yourself, but don't lie to me.
Yeah, kind of wasting your time over here.
What you do is you show up with a wet nap and you say, all right, I'm here to clean up the mess.
Okay.
And they go, what do you mean? They go, well, in about 20 minutes, you're going to be on the floor screaming and there's going to be blood coming out.
Yep.
And they say, well, why? You say, because you lied to me, you bitch.
Sigh. But yeah, there is a great, I mean, you've already heard in this show, in this last, 20 minutes or whatever, us talk about a great range of opinions associated with abortion. Mine is the reason I set my limit is not because I have a moral qualm with any particular number, but solely because I want the advancement of technology, and I feel that's the best way to get it. My wife has a very, I don't want to call it simple, but very human look at the child's development point. It's something that's recognizable to her as the difference between a life and a non-life. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what the heartbeat represents. And you got Craig's over here, and he's coming in and saying halfway. That's reasonable. And
well,
that's a very, very reasonable perspective.
Well, here's the thing, is people say, well, where does life begin? And it's, well, about 4 billion years ago. None of the cells that are involved in the process are ever dead. Like, you could arguably say as soon as there is a third set of chromosomes involved, you got another person.
A third set?
Yeah, when the first two sets create the third set. That's how it works, right?
No. It
kind of is.
No, there's no third set. It's a half set and a half set make a whole set.
Right.
You have a third set, that's
so what
a
do you
whole
call,
other problem.
So what do you call the set that's combined out of one half of the first two?
A complete set?
Yes, a third complete set.
I call that the royal flush, if you will.
Oh, fuck me. All right, so once you get a child conceived, how about that? I'm not, again, none of the cells involved are ever dead. There at no point is there dead cells involved, so...
Well...
There's no place to say, life begins in this set of living cells at some point.
Unless it's half vampire.
Sure. There's no point at which you can say, this clump of living cells is now alive. It's either they were living before and you're now saying they're alive arbitrarily, or they were dead before and somehow you've reanimated them from beyond the grave.
Well,
So
I mean,
unless you're producing zombies that we're spontaneously turning into humans at some point along the journey, it's definitely alive the whole time.
The problem that you have is that we're describing. We're sitting there when people are coming in and saying, it's a right to life.
It's just a fuzzy problem.
It is, and when people come in and they say you have a right to life or something like that, what they're really saying is like, when is it human and not? But life is because humans are complex beings, and even Hitler was human, and we kind of accept that we can kill human beings if necessary for our own survival and benefit.
Annoying enough that the rest of society wants them gone. No, here's the thing: we can all fully acknowledge that, and this is a terrible comparison here. We can all fully acknowledge that parasites are alive, and we want to, we can all fully acknowledge that dogs are alive, that cats are alive. We have, that monkeys are alive, etc.
Do we acknowledge that cats are alive?
They're kind of weird. So
I just thought they were kind of like furniture.
So when we
I'm
talk
going to
about
ignore that comment.
when we talk about life and death on these kind of subjects, again, at some point it has to be alive enough for you to care about the fact that it's alive. And if you continuously harp on the fact that there's a life involved, well, again, as soon as these two separate sets of chromosomes combine to create this new unique individual in this one cell.
Kind of like Voltron.
Yes.
Yes, kind of.
Minus two limbs.
And
Voltron
have
minus
the
the
keys.
limbs.
That's very ableist of you.
Okay, fine. Voltron in a wheelchair after a war.
I don't know how weird and esoteric we've gotten here, but I think we've gotten so far off the path that we need to start wrapping this up. I don't even know where to go.
I just say, it's alive the entire fucking time. So when you start talking about the sanctity of life, you have if you're gonna compromise on it, then either you're gonna have to be hypocritical about it, or you're gonna have to make certain acknowledgments, which are gonna make you feel hypocritical anyway.
Now, I think the real question that is burning in people's minds.
Which is why.
Yeah,
go ahead.
There's that dude who swallowed a seed and it grew into a tree. So is Kamala Harris gonna have a giant baby, aliening its way out?
Oh, there might be one in her skull.
Interesting. Interesting proposition.
So this is why, by the way, I don't focus on when during the birth, generally speaking. You should say, okay, after now you can't do an abortion. What I instead focus on is the edge cases that define the necessity for abortion in the first place, with the hope that you would never have a need for an abortion elsewise, or you'd never legally allow it, or blah, 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 whatever. The major point is the necessity for the procedure is demarcated and delineated by these specific edge cases that require it in order for the best outcome to be possible.
Well,
and that's why I focus on that instead of what fuzzy boundary we're going to pick between conception and birth to say, okay, now it's a baby, or now it's a viable human, now it's a viable fetus, blah, 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 blah.
And again, I will iterate that...
I think it's the more sane way to go about it is to say, this is why it's necessary.
It is in particular necessary when it is the offspring of another male.
Well, that is in its way technically natural, but kind of.
I have a friend. I have a friend who's argued that Sanger's vision was actually the best vision, and that you need to control the black population using abortion, and he's a complete prick, mind you.
Wow. That's a special level of
prick. About out there, that is other opinions that I tend to agree with. The modern progressive position, as go for it, because the more people that of certain insert annoying category here, annoying in the description of it, not in the actual category. Certain annoyingly described categories are necessarily targeted by their own self-inflictions, And that's just like, that's cruel and unusual and disgusting. Yeah, okay. Just, so the people you find strange bedfellows in these arguments. Is the point of that? That the ultra racists out there.
Well, isn't that the continuous running joke that the racist and the woke are really the same, two sides of the same coin?
Yes. Well, that's kind of besides.
I don't know if I would say if they're actually even on opposite sides of the coin.
Perspective too. Like before, there was a convergence between the two species there. The woke and the white nationalist. So I came ahead of myself and something came up that wasn't supposed to.
What, your white nationalist friend?
I don't know. Depending on who you ask, they could probably just say we all are on this show.
God, that would be kind of frustrating for me, I guess.
I mean, I suppose that's probably true if you put that into the depending on who you ask. But then again, the people who,
well, I have to
depending
ask
on who you ask.
Which one-drop rule are they going to judge me by? Is what I have to ask.
I think at the end of the day, when you start talking about the people who want to call stuff like what we're talking about white supremacists, right? Those people honestly believe that they're white supremacists because everybody's a racist, right?
Oh,
like they're so
the archetypal woke white woman who comes in like a fucking badger in an anthill.
Yeah, there's a lot of inherent racism in that whole class of individual. There really, really is. Like, that's worthy of a long discussion in and of itself. And we've been at this for like 3 hours, so I don't want to throw another hour into just explaining how people on the far left are the most blisteringly racist people that have possibly ever existed in the history of humanity. But that being said, I don't think I had anything else I was wanting to go over there. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about this week before we get out of here?
Waffles.
Not blue waffles.
What?
They're my favorite kind.
Are they?
They are nutty. Delicious.
I guess. Well, yeah, I guess that's about that. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. Check us out on all the main social media, all the alt media. I'm at that fake guy Dan. Look up Craig at CraigBob99 on most of the things. And Steve, if you can find him, is Ratman720.
I'm very sneaky.
Well.
Very sneaky.
And with that, we'll talk to you all again real soon. Be safe out there, and really, be safe out there. The world's getting crazy and dangerous and a little bit more clownish every week.
Take care of yourself. Protect yourself.
Buy a 3D printer. Inner 3s are really inexpensive.
Oh,
yes.
Speaking of which,
you go
we'll
to
carry that in
controlq.com.
after convo.
So, talk to you soon.